Valerie, it's not nice to be in the Western Cape, right?
Why do you say that, Chair?
Because there's always networks problem there.
My network, Chair, this morning is extremely bad. Can you hear?
You are breaking up and down.
How is it now?
Yeah, you better now. Can you conclude?
Yes, I was just saying that the committee dealt with the A-list on the 7th of September. There were issues that were flagged for committee's input. And so those are the updated list is now back with those matters that were still outstanding on the 7th of September. So the state law advisor just needed the committee's guidance on whether she should go through the whole list then, or just the matters that were still unclear and needed the committee's direction since then.
Yeah, the matters which needed the committee's direction, Valerie.
Yeah.
And then we have a legal advisor on the president's reservations in respect of clause 7 of the National Land Transport. Those are the ones that you sent to us yesterday, isn't it?
Yes, Chair. I've sent you all the documentation in that regard as well.
And then we have budgetary review and recommendation report that
yes,
needs
Chair,
to be that needs to be finalized, right?
Yes, the draft report was sent to members. So Advocate Nell will require members' input, especially in terms of the observations and the recommendations, Chair.
Okay.
And then the last matter, Chair, that is not on the agenda, but that you said the committee has to look at is the program, especially since
for making things easier for me to start the meeting. Greetings to all the members of the Portfolio Committee on Transport. A very warm welcome on this 16th day of November, which is Tuesday. Our business of the day today carries about 6 items, and I've gone through those items. Let me just repeat them. We will be starting with Economic Regulation of Transport Bill number 1 of the year 2020. We'll also have a briefing by the Parliamentary Legal Adviser on the President's reservations in respect of Clause 7 of the National Land Transport Amendment Bill. Will then deal with the budgetary review and recommendation report and finalize it. Item number 4 will be consideration and adoption of committee's budgetary review and recommendation report. We'll then consider our minutes of proceedings. And the last item, we should be able to deal with the program of action if time still permits, but that item is here with us. Otherwise, let me welcome officials from the department, welcome officials from the Portfolio Committee, and officials that represents our legal team. You are all warmly welcome to this meeting. I hope this meeting becomes fruitful for the business of the day that is in front of us. You are welcomed. Item number 2 will be apologies. The apologies I've got from Valerie, only 2. Honorable Sithulo will be late, and Honorable Sitole is still busy with party matters and won't be part of this meeting today. Any other further apology, Valerie?
Chair, I've received a WhatsApp now from the Parliamentary Legal Adviser from the department. The minister is still trying to connect. There seem to be connectivity problems, but he will join the meeting.
What is the connection between the Parliamentary Legal Adviser and the Office of the Minister, Valerie?
The Parliamentary Liaison Officer, sorry, Chair. She's in the office of the minister. I'm a little bit Yamakar today, Chair.
I can see that almost half of us are dear Makar, but it's okay, Valerie. Thank you. So the minister is trying to connect. And then Mtegas, Obaba, Chris Hunsinger. We are dead. Honorable Chris Hunsinger.
Yes, good morning and thank you, Chairperson. Greetings from my office at Parliament. Chairperson, at 1 o'clock, I have another Zoom meeting. And should we then still be busy at 1:45, would you please excuse me to join another meeting?
It depends on how you carry yourself going forward. Say we may be long gone by then. But,
thank you, Chairperson. Appreciate.
No, I appreciate you wearing a tie. Maybe it's because of that other Zoom meeting. But I know you have a tie now.
It's a ridiculous English tradition. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Not suitable for our climate in Africa at all.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you. Right. Let's then get on and deal with the item number 1. Economic regulations of transport, the updated A list on issues that still needs clarity from the portfolio committee. Who's presenting? Valerie, the Parliamentary Legal Adviser.
Okay, it will be the state law advisor.
May Haricharan.
Yes, Chair.
Ms. Haricharan.
Good morning, Chair, and to the parliamentary members. Chair, with regards to the A list for the Economic Regulation of Transport Bill, on the last occasion, the members indicated further amendments to be included in the A list. Chair, just to obtain some clarity from the chairperson regarding the A list, would it be required of me to go through the entire A list again, or the updated version with the further additions to the A list, please, Chair? Chair can assist. Thank you.
I have already assisted Ms. Haricharan, but I'm kind enough to repeat myself. I have said there is no need to go through all over again to the issues that the portfolio committee has expressed itself on. Let's be business-like this morning and deal with those issues that the portfolio committee needed to clarify and have a way forward on them.
Thank you, Chair, for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Chairperson, on the page 1 of the updated A list, just to discuss the further amendments that was requested, it's point 5 on page 1. Point 5 states on page 1, after line 33, to insert the following definitions. This was in regards to the inclusion of the definitions of the POPI and the Protection of Personal Information Act and the the PIA Act. Point 5 on page 7, after line 33, to insert the following definitions. PIA means the Promotion of Access to Information Act, 2000, in brackets Act number 2 of 2000. POPIA means the Protection of Personal Information Act 2013, Act number 4 of 2013. The next updated amendment, Chair, is on page 2 of the A list. It's page 2, clause 2, point number 3.
Okay. I think maybe we should take clause by clause, Ms. Haricharan, am I correct? And just understand if members are fine. If members are fine, then we go page 2 and like that.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable members, let's implore the approach which we always use during this time. If there is an issue members wants to raise on a particular specific law, I will see by hands. If there are no hands going once, twice, thrice, that shall mean that we agree with the updated version. Can we agree on that, honorable members?
Agreed, Chairperson.
Agreed. Any dissenting view? No dissenting view. Who is seconding Honorable McDonald?
Will second Chairperson Honorable Mapena.
Baba Mapena, Nkosi yami ungixolele uma sengingasakubulisa. Thank you very much. Masarakele Pambili, Ms. Haricharan. Any view on this one that Ms. Haricharan has just talked about? Going once, twice, thrice. Thank you very much. Let's continue, Mayor Haricharan.
Thank you, Chair. On page 2 of the updated A list, clause 2, point number 3. On page 8, after line 16, to insert the following subsection. Subsection 5, the access, protection, and dissemination of information, including personal and confidential information, must be done in a manner consistent with and in accordance with POPIA and PIA. This is the proposed clause, Chair.
Members, going once, twice, and thrice. We are in agreement. Let's push ahead.
Thank you, Chair. On page 4 of the updated A list, Chair, I may refer the members to page 4. Page 4, clause 47. There are proposed amendments to the clause 47, addressing the members' requirement for Parliament to be involved in the interviewing and shortlisting of members of the council. Okay. Clause 47, point number 1, on page 26 in line 32, after Minister, to insert in accordance with the procedure set out in subsections 3 and 4. Chair, just to get some direction, should I go through the entire section or will we deal with it point by point, Chair?
Of this section. Of this.
Yes, of this clause.
Yeah, okay, let's maintain consistency. Clause by clause, or let's take the whole section of this clause. And
that's fine.
Yeah, sure.
That's fine. Thank you, Chair. Okay, and then point 2 on page 26 in line 35, section after the word subsection, to omit 3 and to substitute 5. Okay. Point number 3 on page 26 after line 35, to insert the following subsections. 3, the minister must forward the nominations received to the relevant portfolio committee in the National Assembly, who must, in a consensus-seeking manner, A, compile a short list of at least 9 candidates. B, interview in a public and transparent manner each of the candidates whose names appear on the short list. C, consult with the relevant select committee in the National Council of Provinces. And D, compile and forward to the minister a final shortlist, provided that no final shortlist of more than 11 candidates is compiled. On page 5 of the updated ALS, point 4, on page 5, subsection 4. The minister, after consultation with the relevant portfolio committee, must appoint the members of the council from the persons whose names appear on the final shortlist contemplated to in subsection 3D. Point number 4, on page 26 in line 36, to omit 3 and to substitute 5. On page 26, point number 5, on page 26 in line 39, to omit 4 and to substitute 6. Point number 6, on page 26 in line 42, to omit 5 and to substitute 7. Point number 7, on page 26 in line 43, after subsection, to omit 6 and to substitute 8. Point number 8, on page 26 in line 44, to omit 6 and to substitute 8. Point number 9, on page 26 in line 50, to omit 7 and to substitute 9. Point number 10, on page 26 in line 51, to omit 8 and to substitute 10. Point number 11, on page 26 in line 52, to omit 8 and to substitute 10. Point number 12, on page 27 in line 1, to omit 9 and to substitute 11. On page 27 in line 2, after subsection, to omit 4 and substitute 6. Point number 14, on page 27 in line 3, to omit 10 and to substitute 12. On page 6 of the updated main list, Point number 15. On page 27, in line 5, to omit 11 and to substitute 13. Point 16, on page 27, in line 8, to omit 12 and to substitute 14. Point 17, on page 27, in line 10, after subsection, to omit 4 and to substitute 6. Point number 18, on page 27, in line 14, after subsection, to omit 11 and to substitute 13. Point number 19, on page 27, in line 16, to omit 13 and to substitute 15. Thank you, Chair. Those are the proposed amendments to clause 47.
Proposed amendment to clause 47. Going once, twice, and thrice. Thank you very much, Ms. Haracharen. Clause 47 is acceptable.
Thank you, Chair.
When you say,
Chair, yes.
okay.
Sorry, Chair. Chair, those are the proposed updated amendments to the A list, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you are done with the proposed amendment to the A list. So
Yes, thank you, Chair.
what we need to do is now to move forward with the A list. Valerie.
Chairperson.
Yes. We adopt the A list, and what will be the next process, just to refresh everybody?
Chair, if the members are in agreement with the A list, then the next step will be the clause by clause consideration. So that will be on next week's agenda, Chair.
The members have agreed with the updated version. It means we'll then deal with clause by clause next week, Valerie.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much, members. Let me just ensure that that is properly recorded so that we don't have comebacks. I'm getting the late apologies here, even on the screen. I don't know what's happening. Honorable Chrissy Unsinger says he proposes that the A list must be adopted. Any seconder?
Seconded, Honorable MacDonald, Chairperson.
Seconded by Honorable MacDonald. Any dissenting view? Going once, twice.
Chair, may I? There is a note in the chat box from the EFF. Ms.
Yes.
Noluchungu has a problem with her speaker. It says that please note that the EFF is abstaining. I have a problem with my speaker. That is from Ms. Noluchungu.
Thank you very much. EFF abstaining from doing what, Valerie? It's abstaining on doing it, on giving a view.
Maybe Ms. Noluchungu can clarify that in the chat as well, Chair.
Okay, so that we can properly record that, eh? Except for EFF, yes, Chair. Yeah, she says yes, Chair. We are abstaining from participating in this process of agreeing. Thank you, that is noted. Then we move on to the next item. Our next item is, of course, the legal advisor will brief us on the president's reservations when it comes to Clause 7 of National Land Transport Amendment Bill. Are we having the advisor here?
Yes, Chair, I am here.
Your name is Noluthando.
Yes, Chair.
Chair.
Correct, Chair.
Kunjani sis?
Ndiyaphila, Chair. Enkosi unjani?
Ndiyaphila, akukho nto. Enkosi kakhulu Noluthando. Masiqhube nto zakwethu.
Enkosi, Chair. Good morning, Chair, and good morning to all the members and everyone in the committee. As Chair explained, my name is Noluthando Mpikashe. I am the parliamentary advisor who worked on the bill when it was considered by the committee. Chair, I will kind of read the opinion so that we can have it on the record. An opinion was prepared on this matter and it was sent to the chairperson and to the committee secretary. On 9 September 2021, the President, Mr. Ramaphosa, sent a letter to the Speaker concerning his reservations on the constitutionality of the National Land Transport Act. Sorry, the constitutionality of the National Land Transport Amendment Bill of 2016, which was Bill 7 of 2016. The President sent his reservations in terms of Section 79 of the Constitution, which provides that the President must either assent to the bill and sign it, passed in terms of this chapter by the National Assembly, or if the President has reservations about the constitutionality of the bill, the President can refer it back to the National Assembly for reconsideration. The bill seeks to amend the National Land Transport Act of 2009. In summary, the President has the following reservations about the bill. Clause 7A appears to confer Clause 7A appears to confer on national government the power to conclude a wide range of contracts, irrespective of whether these are national in scope, provincial in scope, or merely local in scope. If this is so, then Clause 7A appears to be in conflict with the principle that national and provincial governments are not generally permitted through legislation to assume local government functions for themselves. Clause 7B is likely not a mere regulation, nor the settings of norms and standards. It appears to allow provinces themselves to conclude the relevant public transport contracts with operators, which appears to be in conflict with the principle that national and provincial governments are not permitted through legislation to assume the functions of local government for themselves. This is specifically so as the provinces are unable to do so without complying with the strict procedures and requirements for provincial intervention as set out in Section 139 of the Constitution. According to the President, Clause 7H and M, the power in H is made subject to the new Section 11.6. The President is raising reservations about the constitutionality of the new Section 11.6. Section 11.6 deletes the provision that would allow for the function to be assigned by the minister and instead vest the contracting authority automatically in the province. The President has reservations about whether that is inconsistent with the Constitution. In particular, he has concerns about whether the apparent rigidity that is produced by this section, that it precludes the minister and provinces from assigning these functions to the municipalities irrespective of the circumstances, is consistent with the principle that national and government are again not permitted through legislation to assume local government functions for themselves. Clause 7I, read on its own, the clause does not seem to raise constitutional difficulties. However, the clause is part of the package of amendments that the bill makes to the division of responsibilities between national, provincial, and local government, and in respect of which he has reservations regarding their constitutionality. To that extent, he has the reservation about the constitutionality of that clause. In terms of clause 7J, K, and I, the President is saying that it is not clear whether the intent and the effect of clause 7J to I of the bill is to preclude the assignment powers contemplated in section 156(4) of the Constitution. If that were to be the effect, that would appear to be unconstitutional. Section 156(1) and Schedule B to the Constitution make municipal public transport a municipal function. The President believes it is not in alignment with the Constitution to shift to an arrangement where the minister sets the criteria that municipalities must comply with for devolution to take place, and where the minister must give written confirmation of meeting the set criteria. The process and the committee that was in the 5th Parliament, during public participation, the City of Cape Town made the following submissions in respect of clause 7 of the bill. I quote, "The most important issue identified in this comment pertains to the proposed amendments to the allocation of responsibilities between the spheres of government, particularly in terms of the contracting authority. Through sections 11(1)(b), 11(1)(c), and 11(10), the bill proposes that the province be the default sphere of government for concluding subsidized service contracts, commercial service contracts, negotiated contracts, and stopgap contracts. For a municipality to take these functions, it would need to receive written confirmation from the minister that it complies with criteria that may be set by the minister. In addition, the national sphere may enter into this contract in terms of the proposed section 11(1). This is a significant shift from the current situation where under section 11(1) of the National Land Transport Act, the municipal sphere is responsible for concluding the above named contracts with operators for services within their areas. This blanket shift away from municipalities as the contracting authority is contrary to long-standing policy and is unconstitutional. Section 156(1) and Schedule 4B to the Constitution make municipal public transport a municipal function. We believe it is not in alignment with the Constitution to shift an arrangement where the minister sets criteria that municipality must comply with for devolution to take place, and where the minister must give written confirmation of meeting these criteria, close quote. Clause 7 of the bill amends section 11 of the Act, which provides the municipal sphere of government is responsible for concluding subsidized service contracts, commercial service contracts, and negotiated contracts contemplated in section 41 with operators for services within their areas. The proposed amendments in the bill provides that the municipal sphere of government is responsible for concluding subsidized service contracts, commercial service contracts, negotiated contracts, and stopgap contracts contemplated in section 41A with operators for services within their areas, subject to subsections 6 and 9, and after following the prescribed procedures, provided that the municipality meets the requirements and criteria prescribed by the minister under section 10D, and the minister has certified in writing that that municipality has complied. Having received that submission on clause 7 of the bill, the portfolio committee then requested our office to provide a legal opinion on the submission. A legal opinion was prepared and submitted to the committee. In summary, the committee was advised as follows. The city's submissions that the bill is unconstitutional because it takes away an exclusive function of a municipality to regulate municipal public transport and put a proviso that the municipality must meet the requirements and criteria prescribed by the minister before it can conclude the rest of contracts is in our view not correct. Clause 7 of the bill amends Section 11 of the Act to provide that municipalities may enter into contracts for public transport services only when they meet the criteria that will be prescribed by the minister. Provisions have been made to empower provinces to intervene and, if necessary, enter into the contracts themselves where municipalities do not comply with the prescribed requirements or criteria. And this means that the province will not enter into the contracts for public transport on an ad hoc basis, but only when the municipality does not meet the requirements or the criteria prescribed. By entering into such contracts, the province is giving effect to its constitutional obligation bestowed on the province by Section 154(1) of the Constitution, which requires the provinces to monitor and strengthen the capacity of the municipalities. This, in our view, is a general non-intrusive manner intended by the Constitution when it gave the provinces the obligation to monitor and support municipalities. It is also important to note that public transport and municipal transport are listed in Schedule B to the Constitution. Therefore, functional areas of concurrent national and provincial legislative competence. This means that the national sphere of government and the provincial sphere of government has the competency to legislate on these matters. Part B to Schedule 4 gives the right to the national and provincial governments to legislate on those matters to the extent set out in sections 155(6)(a) and 7 of the Constitution. The bill does not take away the contracting duty of a municipality. It simply requires a municipality to meet a certain requirement and a certain criteria which will be prescribed by the minister. This was to ensure uniformity across provinces when it comes to entering into public transport contracts. Our view was supported by the Office of the Chief State Law Advisor. The committee accepted our view and proceeded with the bill. The committee passed the bill and the National Assembly referred the bill to the National Council of Provinces Select Committee on Economic and Business Development. When the Select Committee processed the bill, the city made the same submission, and the Select Committee also considered the advice referred to above and agreed with it. Thus, the bill was passed. It is important to mention that when the City of Cape Town made oral submissions to the committee, they requested that municipalities that are already contracting for public service, for public transport services in terms of the Act, should be excluded from the application of the amended section that requires these municipalities to now meet the criteria that will be set by the minister. The department agreed with such submissions. However, both the Parliamentary Advisor and the State Law Advisor advised the committee against such approach. The rationale was based on the legal reasoning that Parliament cannot legislate in a manner that sets criteria that will apply to certain municipalities and not to others, simply because these other municipalities currently may have the capacity to enter into contracts for public transport services. The concern was about the consequences should those municipalities no longer have that capacity or the resources to enter into those contracts. Should that happen, then legislation would have again to be amended to provide that the criteria should apply to them as well. In addressing the concerns that are raised by the President, we can summarize them as 3 points of contention around the bill. One is the criteria that will be set by the minister that municipalities have to meet before they can conclude contracts. Secondly, which is the major point of contention, is the usurpation by the province of the powers of municipalities to conclude municipal public transport contracts, which is a functional area listed in Schedule B, 4B to the Constitution. Thirdly, The reservation is around the conferment of a wide range of powers to the national government to enter into contracts irrespective of their scope. In the case of Minister of Local Government versus Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, Western Cape versus the City of Cape Town and others, the Constitutional Court held, I quote, "It follows that regulating in Section 155(7) of the Constitution means creating norms and guidelines for the exercise of a power or a performance of a function. It does not mean the usurpation of the power or the performance of the function itself. This is because the power of regulating is afforded to national and provincial government in order to see to the effective performance by the municipalities of their function. The constitutional scheme does not envisage the province employing appellate power over municipalities' exercise of their planning functions," I close quote. The word criteria, which is mentioned in the case that I just quoted, is defined in the Collins English Dictionary to mean a standard by which something can be done or judged. It is humbly submitted from our office that the criteria to be set by the Minister of Transport is not different to norms and standards that the Constitutional Court held the power to regulate in terms of Section 155(7) of the Constitution encompasses. However, to address the concerns of the President, the wording of the bill could be changed to norms and standards instead of criteria. So we can say the Minister will set norms and standards for municipalities to comply with, to make it clearer and constitutionally compliant. On the second point of contention, we wish to state that the intention of giving provinces the power to enter into contracts for municipalities that have no capacity to enter into such contracts is to assist those municipalities to ensure that there is public transport in those areas. The Principal Act, which is the National Land Transport Act, gives powers to municipalities to enter into new contracts. Provincial and national government are required by the Act to assign any contracts that they were administering at the time to municipalities once the relevant municipality has the necessary capacity and resources. Excuse me. The intention was to consolidate all public transport functions in the municipal sphere of government, with the assumption that most of the municipalities are ready to take over these functions. This proved to be a challenge because it turned out that most of the municipalities lack the necessary capacity to deal with contracting functions, which includes some of the metropolitan municipalities and larger local municipalities. Also, this resulted in disagreements between provinces and municipalities, as some provinces threatened to dump the contracts onto municipalities, claiming that they are a municipal function. To deal with this shortcoming and possible lapse of services in certain areas, the bill amended Section 11 of the Act to allow provinces to conclude new contracts and at the same time to allow national government to intervene where provinces and municipalities fail to perform this duty. The intention is not to usurp the powers of municipalities, but rather to assist to ensure that there is public transport in each and every provinces, even when the municipality cannot enter into a contract or does not have a capacity to enter into a contract. However, we note the point raised by the President in relation to the interventions that are envisaged by Sections 100 and 139 of the Constitution. Our advice to deal with this shortcoming to the committee is that the committee should consult with the department and ascertain whether this challenge, that is the fact that there may be lack of public transport in a municipality because that municipality does not have the capacity or the resources to enter into such contracts. And if so, what's the department's proposed policy in this regard? The committee may then decide on the best policy to address the challenge, and the bill could then be adjusted to reflect that policy decision and also to deal with the reservations that the President has on Clause 7 of the bill. Thank you, Chairperson. I am done from my side.
Enkosi kakhulu Sisi Mpikashe noLuthando. Members, there is an advice as Nolutando ends. What is our take on the advice, members? Consult with the department, Honorable Grace Honsinger.
Thank you, Chairperson, and also thank you for the insightful perspective given by Advocate Pikase. Chairperson, at the time, it was an issue also with the committee, and it was deliberated, and it was a concern. It was a concern which we accepted to differ on. The points of view were clear, as also has been recorded in final declarations, even at the approval of the NLTA in its current form. Therefore, the reaction by the President is no surprise, and it is a bit of an embarrassment to have something returned to the committee where these specific concerns were simply ignored. Which should caution us about how we go about in dealing with bills, that we shouldn't rush, that we should indeed spend time on issues that we differ with, and that we should not forward any bills from the committee in a form which was documented as not being completed and something that we should immediately give attention to. I'm therefore glad that the bill has been returned, and I also recommend that we look at other matters of the NLTA. One of these are that the NLTA presents the opportunity to deal with the relationship of different stakeholders in public transport. The NLTA, in the form which it has been approved by the committee, did not adequately deal with all the partners in public transport. We did not adequately deal with the relationship between the different forms of taxis, for instance. We did not deal with the different relationships between taxi, rail, and buses. We simply approved this, and we allowed things to carry on in its how it is currently, which is not sufficient and it is not adequate. I therefore, Chair, propose that we not only look at this, but that we also address the other issues that, in my view, is outstanding. The NLTA was a rushed bill in 2009 because we were pressurized to approve the PRT because of the Soccer World Cup. And we approved it at the time, but it is well known that it was a rushed work. Why should we rush this now again? Therefore, Chairperson, I ask and I plead with you that we address the outstanding issues, the other matters, the relationship between, for instance, Uber and taxis, Skoros as another form of taxi has not been described, not been dealt with, not been recognized by this bill. The relationship between meter taxis, long distance taxis, has not been dealt with. There is a long list. This is the National Land Transport Act, and it is a great opportunity to regulate and to arrange and to improve the dispensation of land transport in South Africa. Also the issue about freight and carriage and the relationship with rail and carriage. So, Chairperson, I am in full agreement that we should work on this bill, but not just address this clause 7, but that we should look at what is outstanding and what is the responsibility, the full responsibility of this committee in dealing with the different relationships which we haven't done. Indeed, Chairperson, it is a matter which has now been raised by Advocate Pikase in this being referred back from the President about separation of powers, about the different spheres of government and the delegated functions. And there is a real concern about, I have no doubt that there is that there isn't a positive intention behind this clause 7, because we have struggling municipalities, and certainly it is a great solution in the way it was described. But there is still a concern about the reverse of this. Should a municipality then gain the capacity to deal with these issues by itself, is the power then reverted back to the municipality in the current form that it is? So yes, there are big issues, and therefore, Chairperson, I'm absolutely in agreement that we should have a discussion with the department about this clause 7. But I plead with you as the chairperson of the Transport Portfolio Committee that we also look at other issues, which to my view is still outstanding as something in terms of the relationship between different stakeholders of land transport, that we should do our work adequately and properly while we have the opportunity now. There is no need to rush this bill, but there is a great need to write good legislation and to address the relationships between the different land transport stakeholders. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, honorable members. Honorable Member Hunsinger. As I capture you well, you agree with the proposed way forward on this bill, but also you are adding on other matters that you think could be dealt with a bit properly. Let me hear other members who are on the platform so that I do not take a decision alone. Baba O McDonald, Parliament.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the presentation. Chairperson, I'm also in support that let's get the bill back in the Portfolio Committee and let's work on it, and let's send a final product to the President that won't be returned. I think Honorable Hunsinger is correct. I think it was raised on many occasions in this Portfolio Committee regarding the separations of powers, and we were given the assurance that it won't be a problem, and now we have a problem. And Chairperson, to be quite honest, I think if they listened to us in the beginning, none of this would have happened, but it is what it is, and we have to accept that the President has sent the ball back to us, and I think let's fix it and as soon as possible, and let's send a better product to the President for signing. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to assist the committee in the comment that we should deal with other aspects that the bill failed to deal with. In terms of the rules, Chair, we are only confined to the clause 7, because now we are dealing with the bill in terms of section 79 of the Constitution. So we are not dealing with the bill in terms of section 75 or 76, which we used before. So now we are only confined to dealing with clause 7 of the bill. If the committee wants to amend other sections and deal with other issues, then another amendment bill would have to be introduced. But in terms of this process, we are only confined to this to the clause that the President has reservations on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Advocate, for the presentation. I support the view by members that we need to thoroughly engage on this National Land Transport Amendment Bill. To add on the list of issues is universal access, especially transport for people with disability. That is the view of the EFF, and well captured. Members, I think let's be procedural so that we don't have problems. I hear the views of the members, but we're now dealing with clause 7. Let's deal with that clause 7. Should we, as a committee, have a view of the outstanding issues? As members are raising it, we should be able to follow a different approach. Thank you very much. We will then follow the procedure as it is, engage with the department and find a solution on this one as suggested, and adopted by the committee, led by Honorable Hunsinger and supported by Honorable McDonald. I did not have any dissenting view. If there is, let me see it now, or otherwise people should keep their peace. Jambas, ukhona nawe la? Asikuveke Mtekazi.
Good morning. My voice is not dissenting, but I think it would help us that in that process, through the Secretariat and our content advisors, an extraction is made of our deliberations on this section that has been rejected by the President, so that we have what was our view at the time. Because yes, we had views, as was said by the colleagues, but just to refresh our memories, I'm suggesting that on top of what you have just summarized, which I fully support, we consider extracting what were our deliberations and considerations so that we look at it holistically. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Baya. Meneer van Gauteng in Pretoria, Meneer Mangu. Thank you, honorable members. I think this matter has been sufficiently dealt with. Mamu Mpigashe Nolutando. Let's take this opportunity to thank you for your presentation, ma.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We are done with your business of the day. Should you find it attractive to stay the duration with us, we are not saying you must go, but if you have any other business of the day, you are welcome to attend to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Advocate Almanel. Advocate Almanel. Almaki.
Am I audible now?
I can hear you now, and I can hear that you are still feeding your pet very well. It is also greeting us as you talk.
Yes, when I speak, then she thinks there's somebody at the gate to deliver something, so she gets very possessive.
Excited. Okay. Finalization of observations and the recommendations of budget review report. Can we do that, Advocate? I can see you already
Chair.
Ready and
Chairperson.
Good morning, Minister.
I've got other commitments that are pressing. I was here, but I was having connection problems. So I've been following the committee. I thought you will call us. So, but the matter is closed now. So I don't want to disrespect the committee. I need your guidance.
Honorable Minister, we take kind to your words. The last time I was inquiring, you were still struggling with the network, so I did not want to make it an issue. I hear what you are saying, and I'm happy that you don't want to make that an issue. Should the minister be needed somewhere else, we are happy to release the minister. The minister is always making endeavors to be with the committee, and we appreciate that. And if you are having other pressing issues, let's allow you, Minister, to attend to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Long live. Advocate Alma.
Yes, Chair. Thank you, Chairperson and members. On the screen, I hope it's visible, is the draft document that we sent through to members. So Chairperson, members would have seen there's quite a few highlighted sections, but I want to go through the document as fast as I can for the time that we have left. Members will recall in terms of the BRRR, it's quite a voluminous document. This one is 144 pages. Because we saw quite a number of entities in this round of the BRRR, and there's quite a bit of information that came forth from the AGSA. We've also included some information on, or at least I proposed some recommendations on those entities that didn't table their documents or present to the committee. But it's, again, as I always say, it's the document and a report from the committee. So members are asked just to give their input there and tell us where our observations can be either reduced or added, and the same for the recommendations. So Chair, I placed the date for today in the hopes that we will have a successful meeting and adopt the report. But this is our normal introduction. Then we also highlighted the concerns and the impact that COVID had on the finalization of the audit, indicating which agencies failed to submit their annual reports to the committee. Those were RTIA, RAF, PRASA, and SAMSA. And then also the indications that we've received from the AGSA that they endeavored to have those audits finalized by the end of November. And unfortunately, our BRRR process requires us to finalize our process now. But again, just to note for members, once these documents are tabled and presented or tabled, the committee is welcome to do a supplementary report that can be focused on those entity submissions. Just also to note from the AG's presentation that the annual financial statements of PRASA, SAMSA, and RTR were sent late to them, which also added to a delay in the finalization of the audit. Then just also a note as an introduction on the impact of COVID on the industry, both the aviation, all transport operations due to limited movements during the lockdowns, some restrictions on administrative programs, for example, the filling of vacancies, access to vehicle and driver license services. As we all know, there were some issues with the driver license renewal systems. Even claims for road accidents were delayed, with some staff members having to go under quarantine. There was also some restricted maintenance and or repairs to roads or rail infrastructure during this time, and all of these would have impacted on the achievements of the targets of the department as well as of the entities. And we can see this also in the revenue and in the audit outcomes per the financial statements. Then members, the mandate of the committee remains the same. This has not changed. The purpose of the BRRR has also remained the same. That one has also not changed. And the methodology just explains the documents and that we looked at, and the process indicates that we had our meetings on the 9th, 10th, and 11th of November. It indicates which entities we met with, and it indicates which entities we were unable to meet with. And then, Chair, this highlighted section I have here, I just formulated it. The members will indicate if they want the wording to be stronger or if it's too strong. I just proposed an insertion here similar to what we did in the previous years for late submissions. The committee voiced its dissatisfaction with the reasons provided for the failure to table the RTR, RAF, PRASA, and SAMSA annual reports. It was the second consecutive year that RTR and SAMSA did not table the reports in time for the BRRR process. So this was the first one that I highlighted out just to get some input from members, because during the meetings, there was not a specific discussion on the reasons for the late tabling. Then just also to indicate that we did receive the annual reports and the financial statements for the South African Search and Rescue Organization. However, we did not meet with the organization. The organization's documents also, they don't have a specific audit finding or outcome based on their documents because they get audited as part of the department's audit. Then, Chair, there is still part of our methodologies that we look at past BRRR recommendations and additional reporting requests. We also look at the State of the Nation address, the department's strategic plan and APPs, their previous annual reports. We do a small section in this report that refers to the past financial statements. Then again, the strat plans and APPs for the entities, the quarterly reports of the department. We also consider, we look at the AG's outcomes, our National Treasury Section 32 reports, the NDP, and the oversight visits that the committee may have done during the year. Members would have seen in some of the observations and the recommendations that I've included and proposed is, for example, under PRASA, there's some concern still with the safety of passengers as well as the state of the infrastructure. And that is more linked to the oversight reports during the year, as well as media reports and some briefings that we received during the year, other than looking at an annual report, which we don't have. Then the mandate of the department also remains the same, as it has been the same for the department's programs, how they set out to do their work. That has also remained the same. Then, Chair, the strategic overview, we've indicated per the department's documents what their focus is and how they link these up to the NDP and the medium-term strategic framework. So, Chair, just an indication there again that our massive infrastructure projects for the department are in PRASA, SANRAL, and AXA. The priorities is indicated, and then for this specific annual report, we have to look at the State of the Nation address of 2020, where the President indicated these or highlighted these 2 points: fixing the commuter rail in an endeavor to modernize process rail network. In this regard, it undertook that 1.4 billion will be invested to refurbish and upgrade the central line in the Western Cape, while a similar amount will be allocated to the Mabopane line in Pretoria, and piloting of an alternative rural roads program, during which 4 experimental road stretches of 50 kilometers will be constructed. It is maintained that this initiative will ensure cost-effective solutions to the state, meaningful skills transfer, and higher potential for labor-intensive job creation than conventional roads construction methods. That's from the State of the Nation address for 2020. Just to highlight how the department's focus fits in with the APEX priorities and the MTSF pillars. So we just include that table in there. for reference to members. Then also the key outcomes. I know we've had the debate about the STAR, but this is how it's depicted in the department's documents. So they still refer to it as STAR instead of the Economic Transport Regulator as the bill describes it. We go on the documents for purposes of indicating this. This was taken from the Minister's Delivery Agreement with the President that was in the annual performance plan for 2019 and 2020. The annual reports of the department last year and this year did not contain this agreement. It was contained in the annual reports in the past. It may be excluded because of the new reporting requirements, but there is just an indication here that in the minister's forward, he does refer to the delivery agreement that he signed with the president. And all the entities members would have seen that they've now also linked their performance targets with this agreement as well. So they also link it up with those points. The strategic priorities of the department. They have the core 5 that they focused in their strategic plan. And then they have the 8 priority focus areas. This is how they report. They report in terms of those 8 in the annual report. And then there's also just an indication here that despite the above, the department did indicate in this annual report on page 36 that there's a shift in their focus areas for the medium term. And that shift is to focus on the following: improving road safety and reducing the carnage on our roads, improving efficiencies at the Road Accident Fund and addressing its debt exposure, formalization and professionalization of the taxi industry, including, amongst others, the review of the public transport funding model, review of the public transport subsidy regime, and implementation of the revised taxi recapitalization program, addressing Sunrail's liquidity and finality of the decision on the Gauteng Freeway Improvement Project, GFIP, and improving efficiencies at the Passenger Rail Agency, and ensuring reliable rail operations. Now, Chair, in the annual report for the financial year under review, the department aimed to perform its work in line with the following priority focus areas. I just pulled them out from the tables that are in the annual report to show members how the above priorities focus under or shift under their focus areas and how they fall in there. So this was all taken from the department's annual report. So I'm just quickly going over that. Then challenges experienced during this year under review. Again, just to say that these are challenges that were reported by the department. It was taken out from the annual report and to an extent from the presentation as well, even though they didn't do a specific slide on challenges or achievements. We did have a look at those. Again, these are the challenges that the department indicated. These are not the challenges now pointed out by the committee. Those challenges, hopefully, we would have addressed in our observations. So, Chair, again, the department just indicates here the impact that COVID has had on its entities and the performance of their work. They also indicate the impact on the filling of vacancies. As members heard, the AGSA made the filling of vacancies an important point, and members raised quite a number of questions on those. And then the following challenges were just highlighted per program. Again, the vacancy rate under administration was one of the main contributors there. They also indicate their target to ensure female representation and the equity target for persons with disabilities. They also indicate what the department did in this annual report. They would have stated some challenges and then indicate what they've done or what they are doing to address those. So in terms of program 1, a dedicated recovery plan was developed in the 3rd and 4th quarters, and progress was monitored extensively to ensure that the deliverable is back on track to meet annual targets. The revised target for filling of vacant positions has been exceeded for the financial year. Program 2, integrated transport planning. Again, there was a dedicated recovery plan developed to look at the draft framework for the alignment of electric vehicle regulations. Program 3, rail. The principal outcome of capital investment in the modernization program is to improve and expand services. The fact that considerable spending on property, plant, and equipment has been accompanied by a large decline in paying passenger numbers raised questions about the appropriateness of project pipeline and alignment with current priorities, budget realities, and the corridor approach. The department indicated here that priority will be given to programs that will return paying passengers to rail high-density passenger corridors with less emphasis on low-density corridors, even if projects in low-density corridors are easier to implement. During the financial year, rolling stock fleet renewal program, a total of 25 new trains were provisionally accepted for delivery as at the end of March, and the number of jobs created in the program amounted to 878. In the modernization program, 1,691 jobs were created in the first 3 quarters, and in the 4th quarter, jobs declined to 404 as a result of the signaling program nearing completion in Gauteng and the Western Cape. Then under the road transport, they indicated the tabling for the National Anti-Fraud and Corruption Strategy. As indicated through the year, they've had some difficulties in finalizing this item. The loss of life due to a crash will impact negatively on the survivors, who might include dependents such as women and children, because the motor vehicle involved may have obtained its roadworthy certificate in a fraudulent manner. Same would apply to driver who might have obtained his or her driving license illegally, and to that end, it's envisioned that the National Anti-Fraud and Corruption Strategy will address issues of this nature. They have a dedicated recovery plan in order to get that plan back on track. Linked to the Rural Road Asset Management System grant, RAMS, they indicated challenges from COVID again. COVID regulations delayed the appointment of service providers. The issue of ownership of the program by the municipalities, as most times data is hosted by service providers instead of districts. Involvement of some local municipalities in the program has been a challenge. Delays by district municipalities to procure technical services on time long before expiry of the contracts. Handing over of graduates by ongoing service provider when the contract comes to an end to the DM and or the newly appointed service provider. DM is district municipality. Lack of support from the provincial government in some of the provinces. Then they also indicate that they had a major risk of losing the graduates to higher paying jobs because of these concerns. In terms of civil aviation, they indicate a review of the RPAS regulations. Dedicated recovery plan was developed. The reviewed regulations have been provisionally withdrawn by the Civil Aviation Regulations Committee, CARCOM, due to safety and security concerns. Finalization and approval of reviewed RPAS regulations will be prioritized in the new financial year. On maritime transport, again, they had a dedicated recovery plan to deal with the draft Maritime Development Fund bill. However, the Merchant Shipping Bill and Marine Pollution Prevention Amendment Bill will not be submitted to Cabinet as targeted in this in the planned year. The submission of those bills are prioritized in the new financial year, which is this year, the 2021-22 year. Then public transport, they had some challenges with the approval of reviewed regulations for integrated single ticketing system. A dedicated recovery plan was put in place. Reasonably, the deliverable made optimal progress during the financial year. Delays in finalizing and gazetting the reviewed regulations due to COVID-19 meant that targeted approval could not be achieved in the 4th quarter. And the finalization and submission for approval will be prioritized in the new financial year. Then key policy developments and legislative changes. Here they indicate the ERT bill was introduced to Parliament and subsequently approved for public comment in pursuance of further processing. The National Rail Safety Bill was approved by Cabinet and introduced in Parliament in March 2021. Planned consultations between the department and the DPE on the recommended corporatization of the Transnet National Ports Authority in line with the requirement of the National Ports Act were conducted during July and September 2020, bringing the need to comply with the Act nearer. The TNPA was established as an independent subsidiary of Transnet in June 2021, so that was after the reporting period. And then the rolling out of ARTO was deferred to the 2021-22 financial year due to the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Then just to highlight their institutional policies and strategies over the 5-year planning period, the National White Paper on Transport Policy from 1996 is still here. The White Paper on National Policy on Airports and Airspace Management from 1997. The National Commercial Ports Policy from 2002. The Taxi Recapitalization Policy of 2009. Now, a revised fiscal framework also accounts for substantial revenue losses emanating from the economic shock of COVID-19 and the subsequent lockdowns. The lockdown significantly delayed planned programs, projects, and expenditure in the sector. As a result, the department, provinces, and municipalities in their revised budget applications would have to show delayed milestones and targets, the impact on the operational revenue, and how they intend to migrate the risk towards desired recovery and achievement of medium to long-term outcomes. They've done revision exercises to focus on the performance there. They've prioritized interventions critical in mitigating the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and they've also revised their targets to deal with these challenges. There's a proposed modification in 2 categories. Category 1 will see suspension of funds and reallocation where applicable in this regard, and as stated, the baselines of allocations to sector departments will be reduced. Category 2 will see reprioritization of funds within the budget votes. To this effect, funds will be shifted across programs, and we saw that in the adjusted budget. Then the legislative challenges indicated by the department. What I've done here is just to indicate the various bills that were before the committee or finalized during this specific year under review. So we just highlight the process there of the Airports Company Amendment Bill, the Air Traffic Navigation Services Company Amendment Bill, the Civil Aviation Amendment Bill, the Economic Regulation of Transport Bill, which we are still busy with, Transport Appeal Tribunal Bill, also still before the committee, National Road Traffic Amendment Bill before the committee, Railway Safety Bill also before the committee, and then the resubmission or the sending back of the bill by the President placed the National Land Transport Amendment Bill back on the list. Then the achievements highlighted and significance events, again, these are reported by the department in their report. So in terms of administration, they just list the achievements, the 28 cabinet memorandums, appointments of boards and directors at PRASA and AXA, appointment of the CEO at the Ports Regulator and PRASA, hosting of the National Taxi Lekgotla, allocation of relief funds. They do indicate here that progress was made with considering options for the solution of the GFIP e-toll scheme. But again, yeah, the wording there is just to focus on that it was options for the solution. It was not necessarily progress on finalizing the issue. Then approval for unforeseeable and unavoidable expenditure for Sunroll's toll portfolio for the loss in toll revenue due to lockdown restrictions brought about by COVID. That is for not just the e-toll roads, obviously that would have been for all the other national toll roads because of the travel restrictions that were in place. approval for equity injection for OXA, which was severely impacted by the travel restrictions, and then the overview of funding constraints facing RAF, and approval for additional allocation to RAF. In line with requirements of the MTSF, gender responsive strategic plans and annual performance plans for the department and entities were approved by the minister and tabled. Implementation of the plans were monitored on a quarterly basis, and the audited performance of the department was 91%, with the department achieving 43 of its planned 47 targets. The annual performance report of the department was deemed useful and reliable by the AG. And this is the wording that the department likes to use, that they received a clean report on the predetermined objectives. Not necessarily that it's a clean audit report for the whole annual report and the financial statements. Then, to ensure uniformity of planning and implementation of sector concurrent functions, they report here progress on filling vacancies. They report the workplace skills plan progress. They report on-the-job training progress, and the work that they did to address the previous year's audit findings. To note that there's no new cases of unauthorized expenditure. That was also indicated by the AG for the whole portfolio. The department may not have recorded irregular expenditure, but the portfolio did incur irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure as recorded by the AG. And then in terms of the ICT environment, they also report some progress there. For the integrated transport planning, they indicate the work that they've done there, the revision designed to broadly align the country to international, regional, and continental transport trends. The work that they did to the ERT bill, they've listed there. The work that they've done on the autonomous vehicle technology and the policy to govern these, what they've done to address the insufficient transport economists and transport planners in the department. Then for rail, they indicate the progress that they've done on the Rail Safety Act. They have indicated what was done to address some security and asset protection at PROSA, some concerns there. A plan which was informed by intelligence-driven operations, regulatory environment, and process security response will see PROSA having a fully fledged in-house security with 3 MTF periods to be achieved through a phased-in approach. And they indicate what their targets are for that. They also speak of the promotion towards greater private sector participation in rail. And then they indicate here that in the financial year, a draft private sector participation framework was developed. With regard to high-speed rail, they also indicate what work was done there during the year under review. And as some of the questions of the committee came up, they also speak to those aspects on the feasibility studies and the application for grant funding to conduct this by the China Communications Construction Company. Then on road transport, they indicate the implementation of the National Road Safety Strategy was monitored nationally, and regulatory law enforcement interventions were commissioned. They indicate the fatality numbers. They do also state there that there was some reduction in the numbers linked to the travel restrictions imposed by COVID lockdown. As part of the government strategy to enable safer roads, they address the rollout of ARTO and that the launch has been moved to July 2021. With regard to the Road Accident Fund, they indicate the progress that they've made there. During the period under review, they also speak of the RAPS bill, which was sent back. Then the national and provincial road networks were rehabilitated and maintained during the period under review. They indicate the number of kilometers done by Sunrail. In line with the provincial road maintenance program, about 5% of the provincial road network was exposed to rehabilitation, maintenance, resurfacing, resealing, blacktop patching, blading, and re-graveling during the period under review. They indicate the number of job opportunities created through this. And members will see that we are proposing that they still do some feedback on the PRMG, as we'll see later when we get to the recommendations and the reporting requests. Then for civil aviation, they indicate some progress that they have made there with the education sector for aviation and the conclusion of memorandum of agreements. Compliance with international conventions. The department initiated a submission to Parliament for approval of protocols relating to the amendments of Articles 50A and 56 of the Convention on International Civil Aviation. Also, there was a number of legislative gaps identified, and this then led to the proposed amendments for the Civil Aviation Act and the Civil Aviation Amendment Bill. Then the airlift strategy and national civil aviation policy is addressed, and the devastating aftermath of the pandemic, again indicating the struggle that the airlines and the civil aviation components underwent through COVID, and the department is in the process of revising its economic regulatory framework to safeguard and promote national interests. Then for maritime transport, they indicate the work that they've done with the Department of Public Enterprises as it relates to the National Ports Authority, port terminals, and third-party access on freight rail networks. The Maritime Development Fund is also indicated there, and that the bill was developed. So that's another bill that the committee will see hopefully in the near future. They indicate the obligations in terms of the IMO along our coastlines for marine safety. And they indicate an internal study of the department indicating that 9 tugboats are required to service the coastline. However, at a bare minimum, 3 tugboats are required to service long coastlines. During the period under review, the department has planned to retain the current services of the only tugboat it has on contract and go out to tender for the staggered introduction of the 3 tugboats to replace the current one. Then on the implementation of Operation Pakisa, they indicate it was monitored. Then also the Maritime Transport and Manufacturing Delivery Unit has developed 18 initiatives to accelerate growth of the oceans economy, and a draft operating model for the establishment of a national shipping company was developed. And for Program 7, in line with the IPTN, construction operations were monitored in 10 cities. During the financial year, a total of 6 cities were operating, with combined average weekday passenger trips of 143,000. The 4 remaining cities are expected to launch operations in the new financial year. Again, there is another request in the reporting request that the department does give feedback on the rollout and operations for the IPTNs. Then they report some achievements from the National Taxi Lekgotla and what progress they've made there, as well as the resolutions that came from the Lekgotla. And they list the resolutions: unity and leadership of the taxi industry, professionalization and customer care, industry empowerment, industry regulation. And then as part of implementation of these resolutions, the department initiated the establishment of a panel of eminent persons to lead discussions. Then looking at the National Household Travel Survey, they indicate the numbers and figures linked to movement passengers by the taxi industry, and how they will review the taxi recapitalization model to improve its effectiveness and affordability. They also indicate how many vehicles were scrapped in terms of the program, and they indicate that the department will develop a standard operating procedure and conduct marketing drives in provinces in the new financial year to try and get the uptake increased. And they also report on the number of bicycles distributed as part of the Shova Kulula program. Then members, just the overview again, this is the 2018 appropriations. This is just to give an outlook for the past 3 years. And there's the 2019-21. And then we get to the financial year under review, the financials as presented, and the indication that of the budget that they've received, the expenditure in line with that budget, and the underspending. And then we go into a bit more detail under the programs. So members would have seen all of this in the presentation by the department, as well as the research document provided by Dr. Ngezi. So I'm not going to read through these sections in the interest of time. Then an indication of the environments and rollovers for the year. That's just the table. And then also just adding what is not necessarily in the table, but in a search on the annual report, there was also reference made to rollovers for the following 2 items. At the end of the year under review, no payment was effected to any taxi operator by the NEF. The cut-off date for the payment to the taxi operators is 30th of September 2021, subject to the approval of a rollover application by National Treasury. And then there was also a rollover indication for the DORA grant to the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality. For unauthorized, fruitless, wasteful and irregular expenditure, the following was reported by the department. Again, this was also in the research document. It's taken out of the department's annual report. They referred to the cost of the INATIS maintenance and operations resulted in unauthorized expenditure of 1.3 billion that has been incurred in prior years. Hence, this is not in the current year. These are old unauthorized expenditure that still has to be either condoned or finalized. An amount to the tune of 980,000 was incurred, not in accordance with the vote of the program for road transport. They've also indicated there. And then they indicate the steps that they've taken to deal with these matters. On fruitless and wasteful expenditure, at the end of the previous financial year, there were 48 cases of fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Out of the 48, they indicate the actions that were taken. 5 of the cases were written off, 4 were transferred to debt. In the current year under review, 8 new cases were found linked to no-shows. And members will recall in the discussions, the department indicated what no-shows were and how they're dealing with those matters. Then on irregular expenditure, no new irregular expenditure incurred by the department, but from previous years there was 23 cases, and they indicate the progress that they made to address those cases. Measures in place to prevent or detect irregular expenditure. Just a note here for members, the table indicates the measures as reported by the department. Then here, just a note for the members, while the committee appreciates that no new cases of irregular expenditure were incurred by the department in the financial year under review, the 8 new cases of fruitless and wasteful expenditure in the department pose a concern, as well as the cases of irregular expenditure and fruitless and wasteful expenditure still occurring in the transport portfolio, of which PRASA was provisionally indicated as the highest contributor. I say provisionally there because based on the AG's presentation, they did indicate that they took these projections from the unaudited financial statements that were submitted to them, and that the audit's not finalized yet. Once the audit is finalized, that number or figure may change. Then also members can indicate whether they are happy with the wording that the committee commends the transport portfolio for not having incurred any new unauthorized expenditure in the past 2 years under review. So members can just say if that is fine for the use of that wording. We indicate the decrease in occurrences of irregular and fruitless and wasteful expenditure, but despite measures indicated as having been put in place, there was still occurrences of irregular expenditure in the transport portfolio as a whole. And then the committee remains concerned that the measures listed below for the current year under review only differ by 2 measures from those which were taken from previous annual reports. And I had a look at the reports from 2014 up to date. Although the department itself did not incur any new irregular expenditure, for the entire portfolio, the concern remains valid, given that the transport portfolio still incurred irregular expenditure in the current period under review, which would indicate that the measures were either insufficient or ineffective, or that the department had not implemented these measures appropriately throughout the portfolio. This concern was shared by the AG for the portfolio in their presentation to the committee, and the proposal that the committee should continue to do oversight on the implementation of these matters. Just to indicate where the changes were, the reference to the bid to the back BAC from the previous year was changed in their measures to a request for condonation from National Treasury. And I'll show members the wording now on the table to check for sundry payments. And then also again, the committee noted that a previous measure that sought to ensure training was provided to staff involved in the procurement process remains removed from the measures in place during the previous and current years under review. This is especially concerning as the committee extended recommendations to the Minister, as well as the Minister in Finance, to assist with ensuring that officials in SCM for the transport portfolio were sufficiently trained to ensure that irregular expenditure is prevented. The AG also indicated that there is a need to ensure that the staff appointed in SCM directorates in the transport portfolio are sufficiently trained and skilled to ensure compliance to the internal procurement policies, as well as the PFMA and other procurement legislation. Based on this, the department has therefore not improved or reviewed these measures as requested by the committee during the previous BRRRs. And members will see here the annual report for the current year in this last table. Just shows repeats of the wording from previous years, that it hasn't really changed much. Here is where the change is from reference to back to National Treasury. That could be because of the centralized procurement framework that is in place. The question was not asked to the department, but that may be the reason for the change in reference to the internal bid assessment committee versus National Treasury being approached. So members will see here the initiatives to train was 3 years ago. as part of their initiatives to address concerns, and it's been removed last year and this year. And then also that the reference here to sundry payments has been removed from this year's measures. Then an overview and assessment of the program performance. Members would have again seen this in our research review documents. So I'm just going to go through them just to show them on the screen. This is in the research documents, but it was also taken from the department's annual report. That is also an indication on their performance in human resource management, and then a summary of the previous year's reporting requests. During the 2020 BRRR, committee requested additional matters for the department to report on. On page 188 of the annual report, the department refers in general to the 2020 BRRR of the committee. Unlike last year, the department did not list these reporting requests in its annual report for the year under review. The department also did not indicate how it responded to these requests in the annual report. The committee noted that in the course of engagements throughout the year, the department did address some of these issues. Members would have seen some of those issues were addressed, or at least documents were submitted to the committee throughout the year in the tracking document. The committee is of the view that the department and its entities must comply with the additional reporting requests contained in its BRRR, and that the failure to do so will not be accepted. A number of these requests are repeated in this year's additional reporting requests due to repeat findings by the AGSA, as well as the failure of the department and its entities to ensure that all of these were reported on and resolved within the set timeframes. So this table just is a copy of last year's reporting requests that we had at the bottom of our BRRR. The new ones members will see below, but there's a lot of repetition again with small adjustments based on, for example, feedback that the committee did receive regarding the mulatto road and rail aspects during the year. So that one will be changed slightly in the additional request below. And then also there wasn't, members will see that this one for CBRTA, we may have to look at changing the wording or the reporting requests. The old request was that a resolution to the impasse linked to the South Africa Kingdom of Lesotho impasse needed to be found, but the committee did note in the previous year that there was some progress made. But there wasn't a specific indication in the presentation from CBRTA or discussion on this during the meeting. So members' input for those recommendations and reporting requests will definitely assist when we get to that section below. And then on observations, the first one, I just highlighted the reasons for non-tabling of reports. In general, COVID did have an impact on some of the delays. We saw that last year as well. Then also an indication from the AG, what their feedback was on when they believe that the audits would be finalized for RAF, PRASA and SAMSA. And then I just took extracts from the letters submitted by the minister for the reasons for the late tabling. The letters were forwarded to members. I'm not going to read through these sections right now. Just to indicate to members that, especially here for SAMSA, it's a bit of a concern where the minister just indicated in the letter that he received a list of reasons from SAMSA, but he did not attach that list to his letter. So the reasons for the delays on SAMSA stabling is not entirely clear. There was also not a lot of detail on this in the AG's presentation or the presentation by the department on why the delay was there for SAMSA. So members will see here, committee noted that the AG indicated the annual financial statements for PRASA, SAMSA and RTO were submitted late for the audit process to start. Committee also noted that the AG indicated that the audit of RTO was finalized. However, the annual financial statements were not tabled in time for this report. Committee noted that despite the indication in the letters from the minister that the audits should be finalized by 31 October or soon, that this was not the case, as indicated by the time the committee met with the AGSA on 9 November, when the AG said those will only be done by the end of November. Then the highlight bit, it is the second consecutive year that the annual reports of RTO and SAMSA will not tabled in time. The committee is disappointed that reasons tabled by the minister for the delay of the tabling of the SAMSA annual report are not detailed or sufficient. Despite tabling the report on time during the 2020 BRRR process, PRASA has regressed back to failing to submit their annual report in time, as was the case in the year preceding, in the 2019 BRRR. The delay linked to the audit of the asset register of PRASA is a concern, as media reports and oversight visits indicated that widespread vandalism has been afflicted to the assets of the entity, and it is imperative to have an updated record of the total asset list and asset losses suffered by the entity during the year under review. The dispute between the Road Accident Fund and the AG is noted, and the committee hopes that the outcome of this dispute will offer future interpretation certainty for all entities. Committee noted with concern through the presentation by the AG that the delays in finalizing investigations at RT are impacted on the audit process, as well as the indication by the AG of the possibility that some information submitted may have been fabricated. Then the 4 entities' annual reports remain outstanding at the time of adoption of this report. Then 7.2, the opinions expressed by the AG. This is taken from the AGSA's presentation. So this is just a copy and a Word format, basically, of the AG's PowerPoint slides for members. So I'm going to just scroll through these. Members did see this in detail in the AG's presentation. Then just the recommendations by the AG for the department and the entities is listed there, those 4. And then the recommendations that the AG made to the committee. Having looked at the previous year's recommendations, these are basically the same as what the AG requested or recommended the committee to do in the previous year. Then the committee observations following the engagements with the AG. Here we'll go in a little bit more detail. The AG indicated that the transport portfolio had shown a slight improvement in performance, and this was evident in the improved audit outcomes of the RSR and the ports regulator. 2 unqualified opinions with no findings, along with CBRTA receiving its 6th unqualified opinion with no findings, the DLCA with its 2nd consecutive year of an unqualified opinion with no findings, and SACA with its 8th unqualified opinion with no findings in the past 9 years. The department for the 5th year received an unqualified opinion with findings, which also contained a number of repeat findings. And although RTO did not submit the annual
recording
report
stopped
in time for the BRRR process, the AGSA indicated that their audit outcome improved from a disclaimer with findings to a qualified opinion with findings. The fact that the audits were not finalized.
Recording in progress.
This one should be no annual reports tabled of PRASA, RAF, and SAMSA showed a regression in performance and may impact the overall performance of the portfolio once these audits are finalized. this is just an indication in Word when we look at the graph given by the AGSA of the findings, the audit outcomes. Okay, I'm not sure why there's marks on my screen, Chair. I'm just going to stop share and reshare. Okay.
Stop and reshare. You're fine now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson. The committee was pleased to note that CBRT had continued to retain its unqualified audits with no material findings, despite the challenges it faced. The most significant of the challenges that remain is the one around the insufficient funding regime of the entity, border crossing backlogs, COVID-19 lockdown restrictions on travel, and that the impasse on the issuance of passenger permits for the RSA Lesotho route remains unresolved. The committee welcomed the improved audit findings from unqualified with material findings to unqualified with no material findings from RSR and Ports Regulator. Although it has not yet submitted the annual report, the committee noted a slight improvement in audit outcome of ARTIA from disclaimer to qualified with findings. Then the committee expressed concern over the failure to submit annual reports from ARTIA, SAMSA, PRASA, and RAF, as well as the fact that the audits of PRASA, RAF, and SAMSA would not finalize in time for the current BRRR process. This is especially concerning as the audit outcome of SAMSA in the 2020 BRRR period had been a qualified audit for 4 years in a row. For PRASA, it was a disclaimer with findings for 2 years in a row, and ARTIA regressed during the 2020 BRRR process to a disclaimer with findings. Although the achievement of prerequisite performance targets is to be applauded, the committee was of the view that there remained insufficient linkages between the meeting of targets and an actual or tangible improvement in service delivery standards to all transport stakeholders. It was also important to note that due to the limitations on the audit process imposed due to COVID-19 lockdown restrictions, the AG did not audit the same number of outcomes per auditee as in the years preceding the 2019-20 financial year. For this reason, the committee continues to urge that the department and its entities move towards the development of key performance targets that would have tangible and measurable results that show actual and/or improved service delivery to all transport stakeholders. This was also an aspect raised by the AG in its presentation to the committee. It was noted that SANRAL received its 18th unqualified audit opinion with emphasis of matter. This may require a new approach to the plans they put in place to adequately address the audit findings, greater emphasis on consequence management and compliance with SCM prescripts, and an urgent need to finalize the GFIP funding model. SOCA is commended for once again being an entity of the department that managed to achieve all of its performance targets for the financial year under review. This was achieved for 7 years in a row, and the RSR achieved all of their targets for the year under review. The Ports Regulator met 34 out of 35 targets. This is a regression from the achievement of all targets in the previous year. And then just again, the highlighted bit, for the 5th consecutive year, the committee notes a failure by the department to ensure that all of its entities table their annual reports on time, and that the committee was once more unable to engage and perform its oversight function fully over 4 entities that failed to table within the BRRR process. Although the annual reports of these entities could not be engaged on, the committee noted comments by the AG on the audit outcomes of ARTIA and noted the reasons provided by the AG and the Minister on the delays in the finalization and tabling of ARTIA, PRASA, RAF, and SAMSA annual reports. Although the committee received the search and rescue annual report, these are not generally audited as separate entities regarded as entities of the department, as the expenditure and funding is regarded as a line item under the department's budget that is audited as part of the department's annual financial statements. Once more, the top 5 areas of material non-compliance remain the failure to prevent unauthorized, irregular, and fruitless and wasteful expenditure, lack of consequence management, non-compliance with legislation and regulations when it comes to procurement and contract management related to local content and declarations of interest not submitted by providers, as well as material misstatements to financial statements submitted for audit. The three key root causes identified by the AG were that management did not implement adequate review and monitoring controls over the preparation of financial statements. Management did not implement adequate controls to prevent non-compliance with procurement legislation, and management was not effective in developing and monitoring the implementation of action plans to address audit findings. From the presentations and engagements, the committee noted those areas where improvements were evident. However, concluded that the department and its entities had not been able to clear repeat findings through implementing all recommendations and corrective measures proposed by the AG and those that the committee has made since the start of the current term. The department must focus more attention on ensuring that action plans are implemented to address prior year audit findings and that suitable solutions are implemented to prevent a recurrence of findings in the area of compliance with key applicable legislation and financial reporting. Vacancies and instability of management at the department as well as its entities persist and continue to pose significant challenges regarding operations and the creation of a control environment to ensure that basic financial, performance reporting and compliance with laws and regulations are enforced. There is also a need to implement consequence management, especially around SCM and greater implementation of disciplined financial reporting instructions based on solid accounting and financial management knowledge. The committee noted that during the year under review, the department reported that it made use of 17 individual consultants. Now, members, for this paragraph, we always have a paragraph on the consultants, even though the consultants question did not come up during the discussions and it wasn't a specific slide, I did pull the information out of the annual report. So just to indicate that they used 17 individual consultants. Previous year it was 30, over 9 projects, previously 22, for a total of 4,640 working days. This was previously 6,820, and at a total cost of 33 million. That was reduced from 66, so that's almost half of the previous year's expenditure on consultants. The department lists the various projects in which these consultants were used, as well as the contract cost of these. It further indicates how many of these consultants come from historically disadvantaged individuals. What the department again failed to report on was whether these agreements included the requirement to ensure that skills transferred to department or entity staff were delivered during the contracts with the consultants. The accountability for government spending on state-owned entities continues to be an area receiving attention in the public, as government funds and guarantees are being used to sustain some of the SOEs. The audit outcomes of SOEs continue to regress, most often as a result of inadequate controls, monitoring and oversight. Instability at board and executive level played a role in the outcomes of SOEs, and the department and its entities were not spared this. The level of oversight by the department over the entities reporting to it remained a concern for the committee throughout all budget reviews over the past 7 years, and the committee cannot stress this enough. The oversight branch within the department must improve its work towards achieving a greater level of oversight over its entities. The committee noted during the previous BRRR that the AG was making use of its extended mandate to seek to address the issues raised for PRASA during the 2018-19 financial year. PRASA was selected for implementation in that year, and 9 material irregularities were raised. During its presentation to the committee in this year's BRRR engagement, the AG reported the following progress. Recommendations have been issued on the Sovamba rail leasing material irregularity, or MI. The recommendations are appropriate action to be taken to conclude the second phase of the investigation, and effective and appropriate disciplinary steps had to commence against any employee found to be responsible. The AG here, referring to themselves as we, are still engaging with the accounting authority and executive authority to ensure that appropriate action is being taken. For the remaining MIs, the accounting authority had committed to investigate, and we are currently assessing the action taken to date. The committee further noted that the AG implemented a phased-in approach of its extended mandate, as it indicated during the previous and current year under review. 3 entities in the portfolio had been identified for the implementation of phase 2, and that was PRASA, SANRAL, and AXA. In terms of feedback on SANRAL, they reported that material irregularities have been identified during the audit of SANRAL, and the accounting authority was notified of this as required by Material Irregularity Regulation 3 sub 2. By the time the audit of SANRAL was completed, we had not yet completed the process of evaluating the response from the accounting authority. As for AXA, the AG indicated that there have been no material irregularities communicated on AXA to date. The AG recommended that adequate in-year monitoring of the material irregularities is needed, and there must be consideration of whether the accounting authority has taken the appropriate action. Although the committee welcomes the efforts by the AG to seek to resolve these material irregularities within the entity's reported annual financial statements, it has not seen expression of the efforts from the last 2 years' intervention. It cannot be stressed enough that the strategic targets and key performance areas set by the department, its entities and implementers or recipients of all grants allocated under the transport vote must be linked to actual tangible service delivery to the citizens of the country. The committee in its oversight over the department has continued to request the minister to ensure that proper monitoring and oversight is performed over all grant allocation projects in order to see to it that the actual performance targets achieved through transfers translate into actual service delivery on the ground and value for money. The irregular expenditure does not necessarily represent wastage or means that fraud was committed, but this needs to be confirmed through investigations to be conducted by the accounting officer or accounting authority, but losses could already have arisen or may arise if follow-up investigations are not concluded timeously. It's difficult to remedy SCM inefficiencies when a thorough investigation has not been completed to assist in identifying the weaknesses and inefficiencies in the system. The track record of auditees in dealing with irregular expenditure and ensuring that there's accountability or that investigations are finalized timeously remains poor. The decrease in irregular expenditure for the portfolio is noted. However, irregular expenditure still occurs, and it can be attributed overall to continued weaknesses in the SCM directorates, in the application of SCM policy and national treasury regulations in this regard. The most common findings for the past 7 years related to deviations from the prescribed procurement processes. More frustrating is that the committee and its predecessors recommended the need for the department and its entities to ensure further and continued training of SCM staff. The department has listed the exact same interventions to remedy SCM inefficiencies and prevent irregular expenditure as it has for the past 5 years. And this is clearly insufficient, as there was once more findings of irregular expenditure per the audit outcomes for the portfolio. It was noted, though, that there were no new irregular expenditure in the department itself. The committee remains resolute that there's a need for the entire transport portfolio to strengthen its SCM staff through training and equip them sufficiently, as well as implementing SCM policy reviews to strengthen the internal SCM compliance further. There is also a need to ensure that uncertainty in interpretation of terms linked to SCM and BBBE compliance is resolved between the AG and the entities to prevent future audit outcome delays or adverse findings due to differences in interpretation. I added that element based on the discussions during the meeting and clarification from the AG on the delay for the RAF audit. The committee continues to impress upon the department and its entities that all investigations must be finalized within a reasonable timeframe and that all contraventions of legislation and regulations must be acted upon through disciplinary action. In instances where employees may have resigned, the committee persists in its view that the department and its entities must not stop there. It should continue with steps to retrieve losses from those employees, and where appropriate, follow the procedures laid out in the PFMA for possible criminal prosecution. The preferential procurement regulations make provisions for the promotion of local production and content. These regulations are aimed at supporting socioeconomic transformation. The committee, during engagements, requested that the AG assist in auditing progress in the department and its entities on achieving transformation targets within the establishments themselves as well as in their respective industries. The committee also continues to highlight the need for the department as well as its entities to adhere to the preferential procurement regulations throughout their engagements, as well as working towards the achievement of increased local content and radical economic transformation in their respective fields of operation. Now, members, in terms of the observations with specific reference to entities, members will see here that we list the audit outcome, some concerns from the AG on the irregular, wasteful and fruitless expenditure, especially for OXA in this case, the impact of COVID on OXA, that there's still some issues linked with compliance with legislation with this entity, the indicated amount of irregular expenditure. And then an observation here, the committee noted that the entity was still unable to take effective and appropriate steps to prevent irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure. The accounting officer should capacitate the entity with skilled staff who are well versed with supply chain management processes and legislative prescripts, as well as implements strengthened preventative controls to ensure these types of expenditure are not incurred going forward. We also note the AG's extended mandate and that they did not find any material irregularities for the entity in this year. We indicate some information here on the impact of COVID on the entity. And then also significant for OXA, the committee noted the sale of the entity's interest in the Rollovers International Airport in Brazil, as well as the sale of interest in the Mumbai International Airport Limited. This, along with other funding initiatives, such as the 810 million rand loan from the Development Bank of Southern Africa, 2.3 billion rand from preference shares issued, and a revised corporate plan during the year, assisted in the liquidity management of the entity. The committee noted the management action plan to address the audit concern in the supply chain management of the entity. However, expresses a word of caution that the entity must ensure that its rebuilding of capacity and skills lost during the year under review due to resignations and staff reduction initiatives must not lose sight of the fact that the entity has struggled with SCM compliance for consecutive years. And this must be remedied in order to improve future audit outcomes and eliminate irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure by the entity. The committee remains concerned over the overall reduction in revenue collected by the entity during the year under review, especially since the impact of COVID-19 travel restrictions. And these restrictions are predicted to see future or further loss in revenue generation for the entity going forward. If members recall, they did indicate the trajectory of by when the aviation industry may see a return to previous levels, and that was quite a few years away. The entity will need to report back to the committee on the deployment of the new parking management system, ongoing projects to upgrade the operating systems and airport upgrades and or expansion projects, review of its security policies and processes and progress made on the action plans to address the audit outcomes. Then for SACA, they achieved 100% targets, unqualified audit with no findings. It's commendable that despite SACA commencing the financial year with cash reserves sufficient to survive for 7 months, through focused, astute financial management, they were able to extend this to 10 months. Then in addition, the board and management worked collaboratively to explore various scenarios aimed at maintaining financial stability. And it assisted SACA to ensure that no staff members were laid off and clients continued to receive services. Despite the COVID pandemic, (91.4% of its specific findings, including those of the Accident and Incident Investigation Division by the end of the 2019-20 financial year. A limited scope off-site validation was conducted by ICAO in October 2020 in order to confirm the correctness. So that is just from the entity's annual report. They indicate a decrease in accidents by 4%. And they launched their general aviation safety strategy. They made strides in their transformation of the entity, and they introduced the launch of a personal card license as presented. And then they also produced an aviation career TV series. Just indicating here that they are a self-funded public entity that relies on a combination of revenue streams, and indicated some of the financials there based on what revenue they received and the impact that COVID had on their passenger numbers, and some loss of revenue there based and linked to COVID. So just to get to comments through after the presentations, although the indicated reduction in aviation incidents for the year under review was noted, the committee remained concerned about a spike in reported incidents in the current financial year and requested that SACA ensure that all incident investigations are finalized and that the required remedial measures are put in place. The committee remains of the view that SACA should ensure that it obtains a new or lease a calibration aircraft urgently to ensure the continued operations at airports across the country. So members, they are leasing one, but this one I'm just going to highlight it because I'll also need some input here from members on whether the view is going to stick with obtaining a new aircraft versus leasing. Then going to the ports regulator, it's improved its audit outcome. They indicate their multi-year tariff methodology that they used based on their presentation. Then the impact of COVID on their progress, and then some points from the committee's discussion. The committee remains of the view that there's a need for the country to have tariff pricing that would put the country on a more equal competitive footing with worldwide port tariffs. And the committee also noted the continued dependence of the regulator on the finalization of the ERT bill, which has been delayed for a number of years, but which is currently before the committee. Then for CBRTA, they continue with exemplar audit outcome. One of the most significant challenges remain the unsustainable funding regime, given that permit revenue is the single source of income for the agency. And we saw the impact of COVID on that this year, as well as some of the border operation delays. Indicate here some of the aspects that the entity highlighted. The operator compliance accreditation system registration platform was reviewed. In terms of the road safety strategy, they indicate what they've implemented there. Harmonized cross-border road transport policies, 70% of SADC protocol and other agreements on cross-border matters implemented, and their target group participation. They also indicate transport charges pricing model was developed and submitted to the department and Treasury for approval. And they had the integrated communication strategy also developed. To ensure resilience under COVID, the agency developed and monitored the implementation of the said COVID response plan. And there was a decline in revenue due to COVID restrictions. They had limited capacity deployment at the office to render service to operations. And again, they aligned their operations to their COVID implementation plan. They also encountered stakeholder unavailability during the COVID, which delayed some resolutions of challenges. Then indication on the management operations. The agency operated with an acting CEO for the duration of the financial year. There were 3 positions at the executive committee level vacant, and human capital remains central to the agency service delivery model, and efforts were made to prioritize the filling of the 2 executive vacant posts. The CBRTA had 4 vacancies in the board during the period under review, and this negatively affected the composition of the regulatory committee. Then on the observations, again, yeah, members, just some input that we will need. Committee noted that the agency continues to seek a lasting solution on the RSA, to impasse. In the year under review, agency participated in the National Ministerial Task Team, which consists of representatives from the Department, Free State Department of Police, Roads and Transport, Lesotho Ministry of Public Works and Transport. Provinces of KZN and Eastern Cape are also represented in the team. A draft bilateral agreement between the Republic of South Africa and the Kingdom of Lesotho has been drafted and is under consideration. Committee welcomes the report by the entity that a MOU was entered by the Free State South African National Taxi Council, Maribor Taxi Forum, and the International Cross-Border Transport Organization and the RSA Lesotho Routes Committee to regulate cross-border operations between all inland towns of South Africa going to the Kingdom of Lesotho. Implementation of the MOU anticipates a solution to the cross-border operations. So it depends on the wording that the committee would like. It's whether or not it's going to be progress of monitoring the implementation of the MOU, or whether we focus on finding a final and conclusive solution to the concerns raised there. Then going on, the committee noted that the agency's financial sustainability remains a key challenge as the agency funds its operations through one primary stream. Then for RAF, it was noted that RAF and the AG were in dispute related to the audit, and that the audit was therefore not finalized at the time of completing this report. The notes content here was taken from the AG's presentation. The committee welcomed the appointment of the CEO with effect from 6 August, as well as the appointment of the board that assumed office on 4 December 2019. However, despite this, no annual report was tabled for consideration in time for the 2020 BRRR process. And the AG indicated that there are still key vacancies at the executive management level that needed to be filled to support the timely implementation of actions to address key deficiencies in internal control. Based on the unaudited submitted annual financial statements to the AG, RAF still incurred irregular and fruitless and wasteful expenditure during the year under review. During its oversight throughout the year, the committee observed that RAF continues to experience financial challenges, which in turn increases the backlog in finalizing claims received. Financial health status of the entity remains a risk to the fiscus and intervention is required. Claims process continues to be regarded as cumbersome, and that it still takes far too long to finalize claims and pay awards out to victims or claimants. The RAF and the department must consider alternative funding models and consider all options that could assist the fund to decrease its claims liability. For RSR, they have an improved audit outcome and 100% performance targets. They indicate some highlights. We indicate some highlights for their year under review. They had acting appointments for the CEO, CFO, COO, Executive Risk and Strategy, and the position of Executive Legal Services during the year under review. At the beginning of the financial year, the permit fees were adjusted down. And during the financial year, they received almost all the permit fees as originally budgeted for, and this resulted in more revenue generated compared to the adjusted budget projections. At the time of reporting, the RSR contended that it had requested additional funds from the department in anticipation for permit fee losses due to COVID-19 lockdown restrictions. The department had allocated an amount of 15 million to them, which was received in installments. Other than some questions about incidents at level crossings, there wasn't any specific observations further made linked to RSR from the committee. So if members would like to add some observations here during the discussions, we can do so. Then for Sunroll, the entity maintained its unqualified audit outcome with findings. It still remains one of the largest contributors to irregular expenditure for the transport portfolio. This was again linked to some preferential points to bidders without original certified BBBE certificates. There was also a regression in the quality of the financial statements submitted for audit, and it was mainly due to a lack of review and validation of information submitted by external parties and an inadequate review of the annual performance report. Sunroll does not have a fully capacitated performance management unit to monitor and validate actual achievement against source documents. That's from the AG. The entity also did not comply with SCM requirements during the year under review, and there was an indication from the AG that the necessary disciplinary actions were not being taken against staff who have incurred unauthorized, irregular, and fruitless and wasteful expenditure. As far as the AG's expanded mandate, again, just indicating what we indicated further up, that there was some material irregularities found, but that the AG could not report back on these yet. Committee noted that the contract of the CEO was coming to an end by 30 November and indicated that it was imperative for the Minister and the Board to ensure that the vacancy is filled as soon as possible. Committee remains concerned that the issue which continues to place financial pressure on Sunroll is the continued difficulty to collect fees from road users who choose not to pay the GFIP e-toll fees. The matter is still before Cabinet, and Sunroll still awaits direction in this regard. The agency continues to experience financial pressure on the toll portfolio in its entirety due to the sustained undercollection of the GFIP e-toll fees. Committee noted in its engagements with the department that the undertaken GFIP e-toll discussions were still not finalized, despite past indications that a pronouncement on proposals were due by the end of October 2019. Committee noted that the AG was still concerned regarding the financial health of the entity, citing the collection of debt and the inability to collect monies owed resulted in high impairment of receivables. This is an indication of challenges in the collection of outstanding debt as they become due, which exposes the entity to liquidity risk. In the absence of the finalization of GFIP from the Ministry and Cabinet, the entity should continue to hold engagements with relevant stakeholders to find either interim or permanent solutions. For PRASA, the committee noted that at the time of finalizing this report, the audit had not yet been finalized. Notes hereunder are taken from the AG's general presentation. They submitted their annual financial statements late. However, based on the unaudited financial statements, it was one of the largest contributors to irregular expenditure under the transport portfolio. It was linked to competitive bidding not being followed and procurement not in accordance with the PPFA and SCM policy, and splitting the purchase of goods and services to procure through quotations instead of a tendering process. Further thereto, the entity also incurred fruitless and wasteful expenditure on interest and penalties. With regard to the AG's expanded mandate, we indicated above that they've made some recommendations linked to Sovambo rail leasing, and that the AG is still engaging with the accounting authority on these. The committee remains concerned that the entity has not been able to improve on ensuring the safety and security of the company assets, infrastructure, and passengers. This is evident from the various media reports, committee oversight during the year under review, as well as in the feedback from the AG that one of the reasons for the delay in finalizing the audit was a dispute with the asset register. The committee is dismayed that PRASA again failed to submit its annual report on time, despite having a board appointed during the year under review, as well as the appointment of a new group CEO at the end of the financial year under review. AT&S, for the period under review, they again achieved unqualified audit opinion with findings. During this period under review, we just list the internal audit team's focus core areas. We list other core areas that they focus on for governance, ethics, by the company secretary. And we also list their focus in IT. During the reporting period, companies' regulated business contributed approximately 78% to its total turnover, while its non-regulated business activities contributed 22% of turnover. During the reported period, air traffic movements were heavily impacted by COVID, given travel bans and stringent lockdown measures. In a matter of weeks, international and domestic flights were prohibited in South Africa and most parts of the world, with only limited repatriation flights, cargo flights, and essential service travel permitted. Consequently, the country saw a year-on-year drop in passengers of 16.6 million, putting approximately 287,700 jobs at risk. Then the company's financial and business performance was underpinned by tough market conditions for global air travel, coupled with limited travel given the pandemic. The financial results reflected the challenges facing the aviation industry, with a total revenue of 547 million, quite a large drop from the previous year, almost a third. The significant decline in revenue was largely attributed to impact of COVID on the aviation sector. In addition, the impact of the global pandemic necessitated that the company review its budget and implement cost containment measures. We indicate the capital expenditure, return on capital, and then cash generated. Then, although AT&S is not audited by the AG indicated from the independent auditor's outcome, there was a regression in the quality of financial statements, as the entity still had to correct material misstatements identified through the audit process in its financial statements to achieve an unqualified opinion. Another area of non-compliance indicated in the audit was that the entity failed to prevent irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure. For Artea, committee noted that the entity did not submit its annual report in time. However, the AG indicated that the audit had been finalized and the entity received a qualified audit with findings. So these notes just indicate what the AG listed in their presentation. Again, our accounting authority needs to ensure that the root cause of irregular expenditure is addressed in the following year, and the internal controls around ACM needs to be improved, and they have to be capacitated with employees that have the required skills to stabilize the unit. They submitted their financial statements late. Material findings were reported on usefulness of performance information that did not clearly define the predetermined evidence and method of collection to be used. They received a qualified opinion due to the completeness of irregular expenditure that could not be confirmed, and a material misstatement relating to ARTO assets and liabilities. They received a disclaimer of opinion in the previous year due to management integrity issues, and that was due to inadequate review of financial statements by management. Again, they were disclaimed on the program audit as the method of calculation was not clear, and they were disclaimed on the program audited as the method, sorry, that's a duplication. The entity also failed to prevent irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure, and there was non-compliance with SEM requirements. Under SEM concerns, they failed to prevent contracts being extended or modified without the approval of a properly delegated official. Failure by the entity to table the annual report and financials on time, as well as the concerns raised by the AG, do not bode well for the future national rollout of ARTO by an entity that seems to be regressing. RTMC committee noted that they received another unqualified audit opinion with findings due to material misstatements in the annual financial statements. Financial statements submitted for auditing had not been prepared in accordance with the prescripts. AG also found that some of the quotations had been awarded to bidders based on pre-qualification criteria that is in contravention of the 2017 preferential procurement regulations. The AG reported in the previous year that a report finalized by the public protector had been taken on review and was pending before the High Court with a court order prohibiting the board from implementing remedial action under an outcome. The matter had been set down for hearing in this current financial year, and at the time of reporting, the registrar of the court had not confirmed the date yet. Then we just list some of the achievements for the entity and challenges. Then for DLCA, they retained an unqualified audit opinion with no findings, indicating an achievement of having produced 1.7 million cards during the reporting period, indicate the expenditure, the cost of sales having decreased due to lower demand. Then version 1 of the stakeholder framework was approved. And during the reporting period, some of the senior managers were in acting capacities, and this had an impact on employee morale. Vacant senior management positions were the head of the entity, chief financial officer, and senior manager corporate services. Committee remains concerned regarding the age of the current card production machine, the need to request exemptions or deviations from National Treasury related to obtaining the raw material used in the card production process and maintenance of this machine. Committee was further concerned about how slow progress has been in finalizing the new driving license card design planned for introduction in 2021-22, while the entity presented that the specifications had only been approved during the 2021-22 year. Backlog and renewal applications exacerbated due to COVID lockdown restrictions, online booking failures in Gauteng, and delays in processing the cards also remains a concern as the extended deadline for expired license applications is drawing near. SAMSA, for the third year, the entity did not table its report in time for consideration as part of the BRRR. The notes are taken from the AG's presentation. The board of SAMSA will need to focus on filling key vacancies at executive management level to support the timely implementation of actions to address key deficiencies in internal control. The entity submitted its annual financial statements late, and based on the unaudited financials, they incurred irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure. Then Chapter 8, recommendations. 8.1.1 is 8.1 is the recommendations that the committee already listed in the budget report earlier in the year. So we just indicate here to show some linkages to the new recommendations. Then the recommendations made by the AG, we've also indicated them above, but this is the ones brought in from the AG's presentation. And then we get to the committee recommendations for the financial year. Again, members, these are just proposed recommendations, and the committee can indicate where we should add or delete or keep. So it's going to be quite a bit of highlights here. Recommendations specific to the department and of general application to the entities. Due to the observation that the department indicated the same measures to address AG findings as it had in previous year, that should be previous years. The committee implores the minister to ensure that stronger measures are put in place to address the audit findings effectively, and that they are implemented in a manner that will ensure that the department improves its audit outcome for the financial year. In relation to this recommendation, it is imperative that the department strengthen its oversight over the entities and report to the committee on a quarterly basis on progress made to remedy all matters raised by the AGSA. Then the advertising and filling of board CEO as well as senior management vacancies is indicated in the paragraphs above. should be prioritized in the department and the affected entities in order to achieve the SONA 2018 commitment made by government to changing the way boards of SOEs are appointed. Positions filled should be with people who have the relevant expertise, experience, and integrity to serve in these vital positions. This will allow the department as well as the entities to operate and report effectively and do so within the parameters of applicable legislation. The department with its entities must report to the committee by the end of January 2022. I'm 1 year behind. And thereafter on a quarterly basis on current efforts underway to finalize the filling of posts and ensure that it presents an implementable strategy to address future vacancies. The department should also provide the committee with an updated report by the end of January 2022 on the status of current board vacancies. The department must implement sufficient measures to ensure that it achieves all the annual performance targets it sets itself. The department should ensure that the targets set in the strat plan and APPs adhere to SMART principles and ensure that sufficient records are available to prove that those targets have been met. Management should ensure that it is possible to validate the processes and systems that produce the indicator to enable them to produce the required evidence, supporting the reported performance. Conversely, it should adhere to the requirements of the framework of managing program performance information, to ensure that all indicators are well defined and verifiable, that all targets are specific and measurable, i.e. the nature and required level of performance is clearly specified and measurable. The committee also requested that the department and its entities move towards the development of key performance targets that would have tangible and measurable results that show actual and or improved service delivery to all transport stakeholders. Effective steps should be implemented in the transport portfolio to prevent irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure. Some of these highlighted by the committee are officials who cause the department or its entities to incur irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure should be subjected to disciplinary procedures and, where applicable, implement the appropriate measures provided for in terms of sections 81 to 86 of the PFMA. And we just quote those sections there for completeness. The Act also includes provisions for criminal prosecution in cases of gross financial misconduct. The department and its entities must at all times ensure that proper record keeping is implemented for information supporting compliance and procurement processes, and implement consequence management for staff members who fail to comply with applicable legislation in this regard. Having noted that the department had a loss control committee or division to deal with and ensure the rooting out of irregular expenditure, the department must present quarterly reports on the progress made by this committee or division to ensure that the department and its entities do not incur irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure going forward. The committee requests the following with regard to compliance with the provisions of the PFMA. The department should capacitate its finance and ECM directorates with appropriate skilled and competent personnel to prepare credible financial statements. The executive authorities, accounting officers, and senior management should ensure that information used to prepare financial statements is accurate and reliable. And the department must ensure that all officials responsible for reporting in terms of the PFMA are reskilled by ensuring they receive training or compliance with the PFMA. Ensure that the staff members undergo refresher courses on the applicable National Treasury regulations that are implemented from time to time, and receive training on compliance with the King Report on corporate governance. I'm proposing that we keep this measure in place here for the department and the entities based on the response received from the Minister of Finance in the budget report to the committee's specific recommendation last year, requesting assistance from National Treasury to do the upskilling. The ministry there indicated that it is the duties of the department and the entities, the accounting officers and officials, to make sure that the training is done. Then control processes should be adhered to in the SCM processes. Some of these highlighted by the committee are: the department should identify and address the inefficiencies in the SCM process in the department and assist its entities to do the same where needed. There should be a review of SCM policies and the implementation of consequences for poor performance and failure to comply with applicable legislation. Members of the relevant bid evaluation committee and the CFO should satisfy themselves that all service providers that are recommended for award have all the required documentation in terms of legislation. List of recommended bidders should be accompanied by a signed checklist confirming the completeness of required documents. Contract specifications should not differ from the advertised call for bids. That was also one of the aspects that the AG indicated for some of the entities. Then management should properly plan the acquisition of goods and services and exercise sufficient oversight and monitoring of controls to ensure that compliance with SCM policies are achieved. Recurring non-compliance should be investigated and appropriate action taken against transgressors. Furthermore, management should ensure that their own policies and procedures are reviewed and aligned to the framework for managing performance information and the PFMA to ensure that performance reporting requirements are properly processed by the department. Then the department should report back to the committee on a quarterly basis regarding projects to which grant funds are allocated and transferred. This must cover its monitoring, tracking, and engagement with its provincial and municipal counterparts on the implementation of the PRMG, PTNG, DORA, and other applicable grants to ensure that money is used for its intended purpose, to ensure that there's value for money spent, and to prevent future need for rollovers. The department should ensure that the budget allocation for projects is strengthened and realistic in order to reduce the high amounts of funds being transferred under environments, such as targets and budget set for the revised taxi recapitalization program. The department should develop an alternative investment traction plan in order to make better use of public-private partnerships and the promotion of private sector participation in the funding options for various infrastructure projects, such as rail projects, the Mulatto Corridor project, and other major infrastructure projects planned by the department. The committee takes a dim view of the non-compliance and the lack of tabling of annual reports in terms of sections 8 and 65 of the PFMA. The outstanding annual reports that are yet to be tabled before the committee are of a serious concern. The committee was of the opinion that the reasons provided for the late tabling of these reports were insufficient and did not assist in allowing the committee to adequately assist or propose recommendations to resolve the concerns causing the failure to table on time. The department must ensure and assist while in time where it is able to, that all annual reports are submitted within the legislated timeframes for the audit by the AG, as well as tabling in time before Parliament. The outstanding reports should be presented to the committee as soon as they are tabled and referred to the committee. The committee would work towards submitting a supplementary report on the late received annual reports, should they be tabled in time to do so. The department must ensure that the PRASA board is given the required assistance to ensure that the entity performance is drastically improved and that initiatives are implemented towards improving safe rail operations and deliver quarterly reports on the above to the committee. The department must address the issues once again raised regarding the financial health for AXA, CBRTA, SACA, and SANRAL, in as far as their finances may be additionally affected by the impacts of COVID-19 lockdown restrictions on operations going forward, as well as the continued concerns regarding the finances of RAF, SANRAL, PRASA, and its subsidiaries, and ensure that a comprehensive plan is submitted to the committee by the end of January 2022. This must be followed up by quarterly reports on the financial health of all of its entities. In light of the cost containment instructions by National Treasury to departments and entities to limit the use of consultants, the department should indicate to the committee what measures it has put in place to ensure compliance to this instruction and provide the committee with a detailed report by the end of January 2022 on all projects in which consultants were used, as well as whether their skills were transferred. The department must also provide a report by the end of January 2022 on any consequence management that has been or is planned to be implemented against officials that may have approved the use of consultants without compliance to the National Treasury instructions. Then entity-specific recommendations. For AXA, the entity should ensure its targets meet the SMART principles and ensure sufficient records are available to prove that those targets have been met. The entity must also implement sufficient measures to ensure that it achieves all the annual performance targets that it set itself, and implement effective action plans in response to the findings of the AG. The entity must ensure that it improves on its financial statement preparation. Given the impact that has been felt on the entity's international investment projects due to airline failures, as well as COVID-19 travel restrictions, The entity must present plans to the committee on how it will offset these investment losses. The entity should provide quarterly updates to the committee on its plans going forward to limit the loss of revenue, as well as its plans to expand facilities and runways at airports. AT&S, the entity should ensure its targets meet SMART principles and ensure that sufficient records are available to prove that those targets have been met. They must also implement efficient measures to ensure it achieves all their targets and develop and implement effective action plans to in response to the findings of the AG. The entity must ensure it improves its financial statement preparation, as well as putting sufficient measures in place to plan for revenue losses due to COVID-19 travel restrictions. Then for the CBRTA, I just highlighted these in yellow again. The CBRTA must on a quarterly basis report to the committee regarding the steps taken in resolving the impasse regarding the cross-border movements on the RSA Kingdom of Lesotho route. The CBRTA should report to the committee by the end of January 2022. And on a quarterly basis thereafter regarding the continued engagements on the implementation of the 1996 SADC Protocol on Transport, Communications and Meteorology. The entity should cooperate with the department to develop funding plans to ensure the financial sustainability of the entity. Should the funding model and legislative impediments regarding regulation by CBRTA not be corrected, the entity will also face liquidity concerns. The entity should ensure its targets meet SMART principles, have sufficient records to prove they've been met. They must implement sufficient measures to ensure they achieve all their targets, and they must develop and implement effective action plans to respond to the AG's findings. DLCA, similar recommendation for the setting of targets, proof of meeting targets, and measures to achieve those targets and address the AG findings. And then the entity must submit quarterly reports to the committee on progress made regarding the application for approval to move to a new card format and the acquisition or procurement of a new card manufacturing machine. Should there be a failure to obtain these approvals, the entity must immediately inform the committee of steps taken to limit service disruptions to card applicants in the event that the current machine is no longer serviced and if it becomes inoperable. In terms of PRASA, members will guide us here. These are for the large part repeats of last year's. They should cooperate with the department to develop a funding plan to ensure financial stability of the entity and its subsidiaries, especially Autopax. Should the funding model and legislative impediments regarding regulation by PRASA not be corrected, they will also face liquidity concerns. Below, then acceptable performance requires special interventions and a rescue plan. And the entity must focus on arresting the current decline in business performance, focus on reliability, availability, predictability of its services that is safe and secure and improves customer service satisfaction, fixing a misaligned and fragmented organizational structure and drive efficiencies and effectiveness in the deployment of resources, bringing organizational stability and strict governance, fast-tracking the modernization program to improve passenger rail travel experience and ensuring that the infrastructure is suitable and depots are available to receive the new trains from Gibela. PRASA improves their current services and safety through the rollout of the current turnaround strategy. The department must deliver quarterly reports on the above to the committee. The entity should ensure its targets are SMART. They have proof that the targets have met, implement measures to ensure they achieve their targets, and develop a plan to implement findings by the AG, but that will depend on when the AG does release their findings. And then the entity through the minister must provide adequate reasons to the committee by 15 December 2021 as to why the annual report of the entity and its subsidiaries were not tabled within the extended deadline. In the next reporting period, the entity must ensure that it adopts its annual report in order for the minister to table it timeously. The entity through the minister must ensure that the annual report for 2021 is tabled urgently. I've just kept the previous ones again also for Intersight and Autopax, because these still remain valid even though we have not seen their audit outcomes. For Intersight, again, same reference to the targets being smart, sufficient proof, achieve their targets, and then address AG findings. They must also work to finalize the consolidation with Prasa Cres. Then for Autopax, the same one on the targets, and they must work with Prasa and the department to find a viable solution to improve its finances. For the ports regulator, the same provision for the meeting of targets as well as addressing the AG findings. And then also the entity should cooperate with the department to develop funding plans to ensure the financial sustainability of the entity. Should the funding model and legislative impediments regarding regulation by the ports regulator not be corrected, they will face liquidity concerns. The entity must ensure that it improves the financial statement preparation. For RAV, quite a few of the previous ones here, again, because we don't have their annual report. They should cooperate with the department to develop funding plans to ensure the financial sustainability of the entity, and should provide the committee with quarterly updates on strategies to improve the financial health. They should support the department and stakeholders in discharging its mandate of efficiently and effectively providing compulsory social insurance cover to all users of South African roads, rehabilitate and compensate people injured owing to negligent driving of motor vehicles. They should ensure that their targets are smart, measurable, that they achieve their targets and address the AG concerns once we have that. And then the entity through the minister must provide adequate reasons to the committee by 15 December as to why the annual report of the entity was not tabled within the extended deadline. And in the next reporting period, they must ensure that it adopts its annual report in order for the minister to table it timelessly. And they must ensure that that report is tabled urgently. For RSR, the entity should cooperate with the department to develop funding plans to ensure the financial stability of the entity. Should that model and legislative impediments regarding regulation by the RSR not be corrected, the entity will also face liquidity concerns. For RTR, they should cooperate with the department, again, also to develop a funding plan to ensure financial sustainability. They should ensure that the required measures are in place to ensure its record keeping is improved sufficiently to prevent a future tabling delay as was experienced during this audit process. They must address the findings that led to its qualified audit as identified by the AGSA. The entity, again, through the minister, must provide the adequate reasons by 15 December for the delay, and they must table the report urgently. For RTMC, again, they must have smart targets, must have proof, sufficient measures to meet the targets, and then an action plan to address AG findings. And they must ensure that they improve their financial statement preparations. For SACA, the entity must ensure that it works with the department on improving its funding model to address the revenue generation impact experienced due to COVID-19 lockdown restrictions. And the entity should, on a quarterly basis, report back to the committee on the progress to acquire a new calibration aircraft. Members will recall earlier on, I just indicated that we may need to get the committee's view on the wording, whether they must get a new aircraft or they must report on the leasing of an aircraft while they work towards getting a new aircraft. Then for SAMSA, the entity through the minister must provide adequate reasons for the late tabling by 15 December, and they must table the annual report urgently. SUNROL, the entity should cooperate with the department to develop funding plans to ensure the financial sustainability of the entity. It should provide the committee with quarterly updates on strategies to improve the financial health status of the entity. With regard to SUNROL, the ministry must urgently seek to achieve finality regarding the GFIP funding model. The entity should ensure its targets meet SMART principles, that they can be proven, that they meet their targets, and that they address AG findings, and they must improve their financial statement preparation. Broad applications to all entities, the recommendations, filling of vacancies. When those vacancies arise, the appointment should be expedited so that consequence management can be implemented against officials who incur or permit irregular expenditure as well as fruitless and wasteful expenditure. The following regarding PFMA and ECM compliance, the entity should capacitate their finance and ECM directorates with appropriate skilled and competent personnel to prepare credible financial statements. Executive authorities, accounting officers, and senior managers should ensure that information used to prepare financial statements are accurate and reliable. The entities must ensure all officials responsible for reporting in terms of PFMA are reskilled to ensure they receive training on compliance with the PFMA and any National Treasury regulation changes. Control processes should be adhered to in the SCM processes. Some of these are that the entity should identify and address the inefficiencies in SCM processes, and there should be consequences for poor performance and failure to comply with that. Members of the relevant board of bid evaluations and the chairperson should satisfy themselves with that all service providers that are recommended for award have required documents. They should have their checklist. Management should properly plan the acquisition of goods and services and exercise sufficient oversight. Recurring non-compliance should be investigated and appropriate action taken, and management should ensure its own policies and procedures are reviewed. The entities must each submit a comprehensive plan to address any and all of the AG's findings and recommendations to the committee, followed by a quarterly progress report. We can say to the committee by the end of January 2022, so that we have dates for the first one and then quarterly going forward. Then in terms of the prep notes that I sent out to members, members will note the responses that we did receive last year from the Minister of Finance. If members would like to make recommendations to the Minister of Finance for this year, after having received the comments and read the comments from the Minister to the previous questions, these are possible recommendations. That the Minister of Finance through Treasury assist the department and its entities along with the AG to obtain a definitive interpretation or definition of SCM terminology and issues raised with BBBE compliance requirements in order to prevent future disputes during the audit process linked to these terms. Proposing this one based on the fact that National Treasury is assisting in the dispute between the AG and the RAF, and then assist the department with finalizing new feasibility studies linked to a possible future Malota rail corridor and other high-speed rail corridors. This is based on the response received from them that the past feasibility studies indicated that the route would not be viable for a rail line. But then considering the department's views and some of the committee views during the year, that the department should continue to look for possible rail solutions along the Malota rail corridor. And I've suggested the adding of the other high-speed rail corridors based on the department's presentation on the possible feasibility study by the CCCC on that one. Then members will recall that we made this recommendation to the Minister and the Presidency last year. There wasn't a specific indication of a response on this in the budget report. So it is proposed that this one remains, that the committee repeats its recommendation from the 2020 BRRR and recommends that the Minister and the Presidency should ensure the following: assist the department and SANRAL in urgently processing the decision on the future funding model for the GFIP. So this is still not yet finalized, and the continued delays in finalization of the GFIP matter has continued and continues to negatively affect the financial sustainability of SANRAL. Then the summary of reporting requests, members will see at least here I got the dates right, I hope. Again, that the department should submit an improved action plan to address AG findings. They must submit a comprehensive briefing on steps it'll take to assist in stabilizing its entities. This is filling of vacancies. Then they must submit a comprehensive briefing on progress to fill boards vacancies. There's quite a few boards vacancies that are going to come up now in this month. Then the department should submit a comprehensive briefing on implementation of the RTRP to justify the continuation of the program. That's the revised taxi recapitalization program, to indicate how it will assist with delivering on the outcomes of the taxi Lekgotla, and with specific reference as well as the progress under the program for purposes of implementation of the recommendations from the Public Protector's report. They must submit quarterly reports on investigations underway with additional emphasis on the finalization of investigations to resolve the AGSM compliance concerns, lack of consequence management, and resolution of past incurred irregular expenditure findings. They must submit quarterly reports on pending litigation, as well as settlements reached. They must submit quarterly reports on human resource management, as well as report progress in disciplinary matters. They should submit quarterly reports on the achievement of job creation targets, quarterly reports on the achievement of transformation targets, quarterly reports on the progress towards prevention of irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure for the department and the entities, submit quarterly reports on the Showa Kulula project, then quarterly reports on progress of projects linked to the following grants: PTOG, PRMG, PTNG, RAMS, the coal haulage grant, and the disaster management grant. They should submit quarterly reports on progress regarding the Moloto Corridor project, with emphasis on the roadworks progress, and any future discussions on revisiting the feasibility of the rail programs. The department should submit a comprehensive briefing on the progress made to address and or implement recommendations emanating from the committee's oversight reports. They must submit progress reports on the finalization of the public transport safety plan. They should submit quarterly reports on strategies to address the financial health of CBRTA, RAF, ports regulators, SANRAL, PRASA, SACA, AXA, and ATNS. The department, together with CBRTA, then again, this one will depend on what members would like us to word it. Progress reports on the implementation of the SADC protocol and resolution of the impasse regarding the cross-border movements to Lesotho. Then PRASA should submit a comprehensive briefing on, I don't know if members would still like this because they have submitted a briefing on vaccines, but there's still some disciplinary measures and investigations linked to that report. So we can just look at the wording. So they should submit a comprehensive briefing on the vaccines contract from conclusion of the contract in 2015 to the current status of work performed by the firm, and include the total expenditure to date relating to the contract in question, as well as the progress on resolving the matters raised in the report. Then they should submit a comprehensive briefing on new board interventions plan, how it will address the shortages of train sets currently online, and how they intend to increase ridership. Plan in place to ensure that PRASA complies with all RSR directives, and a plan in place to phase out manual authorization, and how they will ensure that the use of manual authorization will not lead to another train collision or derailment. The plan to address the concerns raised regarding the asset register, as well as the safety and security on the assets, infrastructure, staff, and passengers. The department, together with the LCA, must submit a comprehensive plan on how concerns regarding the card production machine is being addressed, as well as progress on the final rollout of the proposed new card. The department, along with SANRAL, must submit a report on agreements entered into and deliverables in relation to the transfer of road maintenance and further planned construction in relation to the Moloto Rail road corridor with each of the relevant affected provinces. The department, together with SANRAL, must submit a comprehensive plan on managing the fiscal constraints placed on the entity due to the e-tolling GFIP concerns. And then the department with SACA must submit a report on the progress into the investigation of the aircraft crash involving the calibration aircraft of the entity, as well as submit the final report on this crash investigation once it's finalized. Then towards the end now, conclusion. Committee would, through its oversight and engagements with the department and entities, ensure that the AG's recommendations are implemented by the department and its entities. Committee would further insist on receiving regular feedback from the department on key issues impacting entities as identified through the oversight process performed by the committee, as well as the department's own internal oversight directorate over the entities. Just our standard appreciation there to the minister, deputy minister, department officials, board members, and officials of the entities for the presentations made and engagements on the annual reports. The committee applauds the achievements by CBRTA, DLCA, SACA, RSR, and Ports Regulator in receiving the unqualified audit opinions with no material findings. And then just appreciation for the staff, as we do every year. And then we have the list of abbreviations. We will make sure that the any other spelling issues or date issues are corrected, and then make sure that all the abbreviations are added to this list. Chair, that is my very long story for members' input.
Who told you, advocate, that you had this is a very long story?
Oh,
Let me
Chair,
tell you.
it's about the length of a dissertation, so I feel like I'm doing a dissertation for a new degree every year, Chair.
Okay. Would you credit us for helping you in this long dissertation of yours?
Chair, like I said, it is your document, so even though I read it to members, it is actually your words through my mouth.
Okay, thank you very much, Advocate, with the eloquence with which you have actually tabled this document. I like it especially when you show our humility in terms of appreciating the work we do with everybody, including the entities, Office of the Minister, and so forth and so on. Members, I think this report has included almost everything, ranging from observations and recommendations. Let's hear if there is anybody who think we must add any observation or recommendation. Otherwise, we will move at some point to the adoption of the document. Thank you. Let me see how many hands do we have, so that we deal with this thing eloquently as it was presented. That's the second hand. Where's the third hand? Honorable Unsing and Honorable McDonald, in that order, please.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, allow me to first of all thank the wonderful work that's been done, and also the way that it's been presented in. I have worked through the document. It is probably one of the best reports that we've seen to date, and in my perspective, the 7 years that I've been in Portfolio Committee. Therefore, Chairperson, I'm happy with the content. It absolutely represents all our observations and remarks, and I therefore propose that we adopt this report as the report from the Portfolio Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Mhlekazi, ndivuya kakhulu ukuva lokho kubuya kuwe. Honorable McDonald.
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me also add my voice to the stunning work that's been done by Advocate now in the compiling of this report, and also support that the committee support this report. I just want on the South African Civil Aviation Authority that on the calibration aircraft that we, if possible, that we do keep it, that they report to us either on the leasing of a South African owned plane, and because the problem that I had and would be discussed in the meeting was that currently they're using a plane that is non-South African, and it's causing we are paying for somebody out of the country to do the job. So maybe just on that point, and then they report to us on the acquisition of a new aircraft. Thank you, Chairperson.
So the report is duly adopted, considered and adopted. Any dissenting view? Going once, twice, thrice. Thank you very much for your progressiveness. The next item on our business to do today is, of course, the program. I would want us to spend 3-4 minutes on the program. Valerie.
Chair, the program was sent to members. The focus of the fourth term is the processing of the ERT bill, and towards the end of the term, to also continue deliberations on the National Road Traffic Amendment Bill. Chair, as I've discussed with you, there are two issues that the committee support staff needs the direction of the committee. Those are the issues about the stakeholder engagements and the issue about oversight. Chair, the matter with the stakeholder engagement is the committee decided towards the end of the third term to invite these stakeholders to engage with the committee in meetings. I will just give members the list of those ones that requested to meet with the committee. It was the Law Society of South Africa on the Road Accident Fund. There was a claimant that wanted to meet with the committee on her processing of her claim. Chair?
My intention is to say we have only 2 dates available for us. One for the stakeholders, which is the 24th of November, am I correct?
Yes, Chair.
And for oversight, we only have the 3rd of December.
Yes, that's correct, Chair. That's correct.
Because what I want to propose to the members is that other members were traveling from their villages to Parliament. I want members to apply their minds on 2 issues. We'll finalize them in our next meeting, which is, the 24th is available to us only after 6:30. Am I correct, Valerie?
That's correct, Chair, because the House adjourns at around 6 o'clock that day.
Right. I want us to go and check the feasibility of us meeting anybody from 7 o'clock upwards. I also want us to go and apply our minds in checking whether will it be fruitful for us to take an oversight only on the 3rd of December, or should we rather reschedule that? And can we allow ourselves to say we will conclude on these 2 issues in our next ensuing meeting? Because it's the 24th and the 3rd of December. We still have time, Valerie, am I correct?
Chair, the 24th is next week, Wednesday, and the next meeting of the committee is on next Tuesday, the 23rd.
Oh, okay. Maybe let's hear members. Let's get hands of these members who are here, especially on the 24th. Are we going to be able to engage any stakeholder on the 24th? Then we can deal with the nitty-gritties. Ubaba Ulisa Wagamancu, followed by Ubaba Chris Hunsinga Umangimbona. Let's hear from you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. My input is on the 2 issues you've raised. The first one is I would strongly propose and try and implore the committee members that we do away with the planned oversight visits in totality, because of the time that we have left, given the break that we had and the intensity of the program we have. My second issue on the stakeholders, Chairperson, is that we defer them. I know we've had a lot of discussion, changed our decisions and so forth, but if we look at the program and what we really need to do and apply our minds in the context of what we got today also on feedback on the NLTA, I think it will be fair that we apply our minds fully to what is before us in terms of processing legislation. Thank you very much, Chair.
Any other view contrary to this? Honorable Hunsinga?
Chairperson, I fully support, given the limited time that we have in the program, which only leaves us with a couple of opportunities to meet. I fully agree with the proposal of Honorable Lisa Mangu, and therefore ask that the committee support his decisive direction which he proposes. Thank you, Chair.
Decisive direction. Thank you, Mhlekazi. Umhlonishwa masiragele phambili. Yini engathi uyathukuthela nje umhlonishwa mangukubhekile.
No. No, good day, Chairperson. So I believe that we'll get a new draft in terms of the oversight visits. Because the one that we are seemingly going to postpone. So what does this mean? So it means that the 26th and 27th of November oversight visits to KZN falls away. That includes the 9 to the 11th of December in Mpumalanga. That also falls away. Is that what the proposal says?
The proposal is saying we only have 2 days, 1 day for stakeholders, which is the 24th evening, 7 o'clock upwards. And the proposal that was seconded is that that time will not be sufficient for us. Late as it is, let's apply our mind and see if we can put a later date. In terms of the oversight, the proposal is that we only have the 3rd of December. And let's also not undertake to do any oversight visit on that day. Let's reschedule and see and put a proper program for a later date, and a later date would probably be the first time next year.
I just want to flag this thing, but do you see what this is doing to the parliamentary, to the portfolio committee program and the commitments that we made in Mpumalanga? Are you able to see that is going to be now over 12 months when our initial report back was actually in March this year? Now we are already in November, and when we closed for the elections, everyone agreed that we're going to prioritize the elections and that the parliamentary program is going to be congested and whatnot. But my particular difficulty is this. As an oversight committee or as a portfolio committee, our job is not only to be in the committee. Our job also lies in actually going to the people and speaking to them. And where we have done so, that we go back and give a proper report back. Even worse, a situation where we made a committee, no one put a gun to the portfolio committee on transport. Even worse, you were the spokesperson of the committee on that day. You made the commitment that will come back in March. You even went on radio saying that we'll come back to those people in Mpumalanga. But we seemingly are comfortable with kicking the ball to touch every time this issue of going back to Mpumalanga to report back comes up in the committee. Something more important comes up than the people of Mpumalanga. Let me just say this, Chairperson. I drove home last week, and on my way home, there was an accident, a truck, a bus, and 2 bakkies on that R573. And last month, 2 people died in another accident involving a bus on R573. And ever since we said that will come back, if you calculate from March to date, there has been over 20 people that have lost their lives in separate accidents on that R573 issue. But seemingly every time we have to go back there are challenges where something more important, something more that the committee needs to apply its mind in, more than us going back there and actually addressing this issue. What then are we saying? Are we saying that, like, siyabalahla those people? I mean, it's it's totally unfair, Chair, and it's not right. I just need to voice that issue, and it must be recorded onto the on today's deliberations, that I take serious exception that since March, now it's November, now there's a suggestion that we go next year in 2022. I mean, what does that say about our role and us taking the people that we engage with on the ground seriously? It's like it's totally unfair. And the unfortunate part is that people are dying on that road. And it's seemingly like no one in the committee is touched enough, to actually say, look, one life lost is one life too many. Let's try and find a solution. But it's business as usual. We're continuing, and there's no interest whatsoever to even try. I mean, when it suits the committee, we even go and drag Honorable Cedric Frolik onto the fray of the Portfolio Committee on Transport and use him and letters to him say that, no, we can't go. But when it suits the committee, we are able to organize prompt physical meetings in Cape Town to address the issue of the taxi violence. Are you saying that the people of Cape Town and the Western Cape are more important than the people of Mpumalanga? Because when we're supposed to go to Mpumalanga, you said, and through the committee secretariat, that Cedric Flory said we can't do any oversight visit and we can't visit any provinces. But we were promptly booked flights and booked hotel accommodations. We're told that we have to meet in Cape Town agent. We're going to engage with taxi association. There's a waiting war. The people are dying. If people are dying as a result of taxi violence, what is the difference with people dying as a result of the R573? So is that the deaths in Cape Town as a result of taxi violence are more prioritized and important than the death of people who are dying in Mpumalanga as a result of that road stretch? Because that's the communication that we are sending, that we are sending as a Portfolio Committee on Transport, and it's totally unfair and it's wrong. I'm saying to you, Chairperson, this past weekend, I passed an accident. What more must happen? Or must I get into that accident as well, so that you can say, yeah, no, he was driving this issue actively. No, it's wrong. It's totally wrong.
Okay. Honorable Mapena, we do understand your concerns. The truth of the matter is that in this program, we had put priorities, and Mpumalanga was included in those priorities. In terms of different members' priorities, we are coming to the committee and saying, seemingly will not be able to honor those priorities because of the change schedule. We all know that we're coming from elections, our program had to change. Responsible as we are bringing this matter to the committee to say, this is the situation. All our priorities, including mine, because I also had a priority there, cannot be fulfilled, and it is what it is. But we respect your concerns. We will deal with these issues next time as it is, because we only have one day and we don't want to choose that day and begin to fight that where must we go on that particular day. I think if all members were to express their views in terms of their frustration, would understand each member's frustration. That is our work, but let's assist each other to take this program forward. That is my plea to every member. Any other member who wants to say anything, or can we conclude this matter as proposed and seconded by two members, taking into consideration the concern raised? Yes.
I think as we take this decision, please note my abstention on this decision of the committee. I don't want to participate in it. I think one other issue is there's a concerted effort in this committee to our committee meetings, and I've raised this issue with the secretariat offline, and it's not been resolved. The portfolio committee meetings on transport are not being streamed on YouTube, whereas all other committees are being streamed on YouTube, almost at the same time. And the latest reasoning that I was given was that it is being streamed on Twitter. But here is the challenge with that. We use some of our inputs in these committees to compile reports for our political parties and compile reports for our constituencies when we go back and engage with them. And I want to bring this to you, Chairperson, so that you can address it. The people who are streaming are also in this meeting, but they, you know, for the past 3 meetings, there was a meeting that we held for almost 10 hours. On YouTube, there's a clip that is only 2 minutes and 46 seconds. Whereas the meeting lasted for almost 10 hours. It's like it's nothing to cut. Other committees are being streamed, no issue whatsoever. There's nothing, there's no problem there. And then the other meeting, we had like another long meeting. Also, it was only about a 24-minute clip, which is there on YouTube, whereas it's not the case with other committees. Even the meeting of today, it is not being streamed on YouTube. It's only being streamed on Twitter and whatnot. So I am, and I've raised this issue consistently with Valerie, and I'm bringing you into this issue in this meeting, that there's a serious exception and dissatisfaction that our meetings are not being streamed on YouTube, because we use those as well to compile and report back to our constituents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member Babu Mapena. Honorable Sitlulo.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and my humble apologies for joining late, as I've had a family emergency that I needed to attend to. Chair, I think it's quite important to recognize the frustration that has been voiced by Honorable Mapena in both of the points that he has made. And I want to share in his sentiments, and I also want to make it abundantly clear to the committee that if this is indeed the decision that is going to be taken by the portfolio committee, granted the context that Honorable Mapena has provided to us as a committee, I too would want to then abstain from that particular process. I know that I don't have voting rights or whatever the case may be, but I just wanted to add to that frustration and indeed indicate that this is a matter that is of serious importance for both the provinces of Gauteng and Mpumalanga. And as a committee, we should be seen to be very, very, very much aware of the serious nature and extent of this particular matter. And we ought to be able to communicate in that fashion so that we are not seen as a committee, and we are not that committee, and I want to make that abundantly clear. We are not that committee that does not take South Africans seriously within the context of transport. We are a committee that is not reactive, but a committee that is active, that works towards changing the lives of South Africans. And I think that is where we should be looking into the issue that has been raised by Honorable Mapena in regard as it relates to this Moloto issue. So I wanted to put those remarks out there so that it doesn't seem as if there are some of us in the committee who don't understand where Honorable Mapena's frustration is coming from. Because it would be rather unfortunate if an accident of the nature that Honorable Mapena has described and many others that have taken place before to happen to somebody, God forbid, within the portfolio committee or anybody in that matter who is in Parliament, and only then to see an outcry, both and the Department of Transport, because we don't want us to be a committee that sends out condolences about an issue that has been put on this committee table for the past few years, and only to react when a member of the House is involved in such a situation. So I wanted the committee chairperson to indulge in those frustrations, to understand where they're coming from, and to recognize the impact that they have on ordinary South Africans that are residing both within the province of Gauteng and Mpumalanga, respectively. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mukhayesh. Can you lower your hand if this is your hand?
Chair, that is my hand, Valerie's hand.
Yes, Valerie.
Chair, I just want to, if through you, respond to the issue about streaming of meetings. I've indicated to Mr. Mabena that is managed by the Parliamentary Communication Services. And Chair, I just want to make the committee aware that we have the streamers in the meeting, as well as the person that is allocated in the committee from Parliamentary Communications, Mr. Sibongile Maputi, who can respond to that matter because it's unfortunately out of my hand. The only thing that I can do is to communicate this with my management that I already have and that they can take up at management level. But Mr. Maputi is in the meeting with the YouTube streamers, Chair.
I would I would want us to engage and deal with this matter to its finality, Valerie. The item on the table was on the issue of the program, so that we are not confused tomorrow as we deal with this matter. Let's flag this matter raised by Honorable Mapena and deal with it sufficiently in our next meeting, so that we're not found to be all over. I hope that clarifies this matter. Can we deal, honorable members, with the next item? The next item is the minutes. The consideration and adoption of minutes. We have 4 sets of minutes. The minutes of the 7th of September, the 9th, the 10th, and the 11th of November. Let's start with the minutes of the 7th of September. Any correction on the minutes? If there's no correction, can we adopt that set of minutes? Any mover? Committee members, are you still in the meeting?
We are still here, Chairperson. We are still here.
Honorable Mangu.
I wanted to move adoption, Chair, or second if that has been done.
Moved by Honorable Mangu. Honorable McDonald.
Seconded by Honorable McDonald, Chairperson.
Any dissenting view?
Honorable Mapena will third.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mapena. No dissenting view. Minutes of the 9th, the 10th, and the 11th do not have much detail because most of the details from these minutes have been covered by the report that has just been tabled by Advocate Almanel. Can we go to the minutes of the 9th? Any correction? If none, any mover for adoption?
Honorable McDonald moves, Chairperson.
And Honorable McDonald moves. Any seconder?
Honorable Mangu seconds.
Any thirder? Anybody who wants to come there? Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Mapena. And then the minutes of the 10th November, in that order, any correction? If no correction, any mover and a seconder?
Honorable McDonald moves, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any seconder?
I'll second, Chairperson.
Thank you
The
very much.
seconding line.
Wow. Thank you very much. The last set of minutes, that is 11th of November, in that order. Any corrections or any mover? Thank you, Honorable Mapena. Any seconder?
Honorable McDonald seconds, Chair.
Thank you very much, honorable members. for the fruitful meeting on issues. People thought we will not be able to dispense with this agenda within the available time and slot for today. Let me thank you for having been this progressive on the business of the day, concerns that were raised by members on especially the item that we dealt with on the program. I think let's give ourselves time to revisit the program. And as we revisit the program, deal with all our concerns in that program. I think concerns were genuinely really raised and frustrations in a manner befitting, and we must actually acknowledge that. Otherwise, when are we meeting again, Valerie?
Chair, the next meeting is Tuesday, the 23rd of November. Next Tuesday.
Tuesday, the 23rd of November, just before the 24th.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Babu Mapena, usangilwisa futhi mfowethu.
No. Look, ngabalwisa bonke wena.
Okay.
The issue that I raised, Honorable, the secretary to the committee wanted to assist the process there and ask the people that are streaming to respond to this issue of them trying to silence your committee, Chairperson. You are doing such a great job. There was a comment that you made last year. I think it came from the chairperson of committees, saying that I think we were the first or the second committee to have achieved great work and gone through a number of committee meetings and what's these things, legislation. So we don't want your record to be, to be boxed and put somewhere. We want it to be public so that people can see your work, especially on YouTube. It's a great resource that people can easily access. So we don't want people to only, when they put your name on Google, only those stuff appears. These are good things, must also take fantastic. So can the people who are streaming please respond to this issue, because it's a serious matter, Chair. It's also affecting us in terms of compiling our reports for our political work and constituents. Because, let me maybe just in 2 seconds, case in point, I had a report back to the PRASA concerned stakeholders and the workers there. And the easiest thing was to say, look, I've raised your issues in the committee. Here is the clip that I was raising your issues, but this. It assists because it says people that were taking what they're raising with us seriously and were tabling them in the highest platform, in the decision-making tables of Parliament. So if these issues we can't access on YouTube and take those clips to those people, then it seems like we're just ordinary politicians just making promises, not giving feedback. So can we deal with that issue? And the reasoning that they are streaming on Twitter is not enough. Why? What is special about other committees that they get to be streamed on YouTube and this committee is being silenced? If we have to fight for you, Chair, we'll fight for you.
Honorable Mapena, I think that point is well made. I agree with that point. We will take this point further. It's a genuine point. All what I was saying at that particular time is that let's also try and streamline in terms of ourselves, in terms of what is in front of us. You are making a very valid point. I will take that matter on and get a clarification and suggest that we move forward in the way that the committee would want us to move forward. If there is any other issue that we have to trash on that matter, we will give that issue some time on the 23rd. But in the meantime, I will take that matter with Sibongile Maputi. I know him very well. I thought I will just take that matter on the sideline, but rest assured, your matter has been heard and it will be addressed. Honorable members, thank you very much. Honorable Unsinga.
Yes, Chairperson.
You see, we respect you, my brother.
Absolutely. I think it's a mutual respect, Chairperson.
Yeah, so we want to wish you a fruitful meeting in your next meeting. Thank you very much for being with
Thank you
us
very
for the
much,
whole
Chair.
duration. Otherwise, to everybody, long live.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you for a good meeting, Chairperson.